Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome today to our first episode of Art of One Dojo Live. I'm here with Mr. Zach, co-founder of Art of One Dojo. I'm Mr. Dan, and today we got some good stuff for you guys. So we're going to talk about a few different things. One of them being you're not going to believe what they've done to the Karate Kid this time. And for those of you who know, and I know Mr. Zach has heard me moan many times about what they've done and they haven't done to the Karate Kid. We're going to talk about the new iteration of it. Then we're going to talk about some poll results that we put out not that long ago about prisons and the martial arts in prisons. Do they belong? Should they be taught? So we've got a good discussion going there for that. And we're also going to take a look at a fight clip of a real life fight using martial arts out in the street. And then we're going to answer some viewer questions. So once again, I just want to introduce, this is Mr. Zach, and I am Mr. Dan, so we're going to get right into it. So let's get started. All right. So before we get started, too, I want to remind everybody, if you notice in the chat section, we do have instead of our super chat, we have a donation button for the Kids Kicking Cancer, the Hero Circle. For those of you who may have seen the episode, we did an episode recently. It's a charity that actually uses the martial arts to teach kids how to manage pain and how to deal with social anxiety and pain management and emotional management through the martial arts. And it's a wonderful, wonderful program. They've been around for like 22 years now. They go around to different hospitals. They got virtual programs. So it's a cause we really believe in. So if anybody who does a super chat today, that does go towards the donation. We're trying to raise $5,000 by the end of the year. So if you guys are feeling generous or you want to support the cause, definitely go watch the video. We have a link to that in the description down below. And like I said, any super chats today go towards that. So let's thank everybody who's coming in. Solo Warrior, thank you for coming in. I see you're one of the first viewers here. Solo, this is an actual live. This is not a premiere episode. We are live. We are doing a live show, live discussion. We're going to be here for a little bit, and we're going to get into this. I think we got some good stuff coming up. The first off, Mr. Zach, what do you think about this? They have just announced that a new version of the Karate Kid is coming out, and you know how much I love the Karate Kid.
Oh yes.
They have actually just announced that a Karate Kid musical is coming to Broadway. It actually premiered in St. Louis for, I guess, a limited run. And it must have done well because they are taking it to Broadway. There's no dates yet on the site, but I think this is kind of an interesting concept. My first gut reaction was, why? Why are they doing this? But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I'm not against doing any forms of media of entertainment. I mean, you're expressing yourself, have fun. But to me, what I always find weird about when things jump from and it's the same interpretation, it's nothing. So I guess what I'm saying is we already have a live form of this, and it pretty much sums everything up. And the question I come into is, what is going on in this musical that is bringing more to the story that we need to be told through music versus the live performance of Karate Kid? So it's kind of odd to actually, I don't know. I find it a little strange to go this way. But on the same point, too, is, I mean, there's a lot of fans out there of Karate Kid. And after, oh, my God, I don't want to say, it's like 30 years now, isn't it?
More than.
Oh, God. No, it's like 37. Oh, my God.
It's been 33 years since part 3.
Yes, but I'm thinking for the first one now, because this is all about the first one, isn't it?
It was 1984. It's about the first one, yeah. So 1984 was, so we're looking at what, 28 years? Or
yeah,
38 years?
I know. Now I feel old. So I mean, and that is kind of amazing in itself that we have a product, a movie that came out almost 40 years ago and struck such a chord that it's still being retold again to the next generation. So I mean, that tells you how powerful martial arts mean to people and how much people have passion for this movie and also martial arts. So in that sense, I love it. So
yeah, I have to agree with you because my first gut reaction, just like usually is like, why are they doing this? But I thought about it and I listened to what they were talking about. And I think the approach is the correct way. Like they're not trying to emulate the movie frame by frame the way it is. From my understanding is it's actually told from Miyagi's point of view in a flashback format. So right away the perspective is different. And when you have that kind of a perspective change, there's a lot possible with the story. And there's a lot of flashback sequences with they have spirits on stage that will be behind Miyagi mimicking the motion. And the actor who was playing Miyagi, he said that the one thing he did not want to do was emulate Pat Morita. He goes, there was only one Pat Morita. There's no way I could be that or outdo that. So he started to look for values in himself and what he identified with the Karate Kid and what he thought he could connect with and kind of bring out his own version of Miyagi. So I do respect that. And I think that if you're going to do a musical like this, that's kind of the way to go because you don't want to, if you're just going to do the same thing, then what's the point?
Exactly. That's that. I do agree with you completely. If you're doing the exact same thing, then what's the point? I just, like you said, I have to, I mean, without seeing it, but I've been pleasantly surprised on many fronts about when things change genres and it actually works. It's just, it seems remarkable to me still, 40 years later, pretty much, and this thing's still going strong. And we're not just talking about just the TV show Cobra Kai. I mean, the movie itself still has people that are really big fans and loving it. And it's still, even with the next generation, still watching it 40 years later, and they're still loving it.
Absolutely. Now, my curiosity is what is the actual music going to be? Because it doesn't really lend itself originally to be a musical. So I'm kind of curious what kind of impact, what kind of songs do you put into something like this?
I don't know. I mean, I mean, because the original movie had so much more 80s texture and style to the movies. Yeah, I mean, it just was so full of. I mean, when you think of the Karate Kid, you really think of 80s, music. So I don't know. Are they going to go that way, or are they going to try to I'm just kind of curious to see. Are they going to sing, "Be Your Best"? I mean, you know.
I don't think I would hate that. I don't think I would hate that.
You probably would be singing it in the shower every night.
Yeah. And it's weird because it's not just the Karate Kid, but there seems to be a trend lately of making popular movies into musicals because not that long ago there's I believe touring in the UK is Back to the Future the musical, and it's been pretty well received for what I've seen, and we've had the Lord of the Rings musical and a countless others. So I'm wondering if this is a trend of just taking all our favorite movies, or like the people who are like our generation have grown up and gotten their theater degrees and been in the theater, are they now taking their favorite stories as if they were fairy tales and just doing their own translations on the stage?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it has to do with is if you're a musical theater lover, I mean, there's not too much musical theater out right now for you. And I mean, we do have the occasional, big hits. Can't think of the word, the one that taking place in Broadway about the forefathers of the United States. But there's
Hamilton,
not
yeah.
Hamilton, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's not too much. For a while there, we had the TV show on the musical theater, and people really loved it. But I know just when The Greatest Showman came out, they just, was a huge kind of, thing for the musical theater people. So I have a funny feeling that they're also kind of tired of doing musical theater where no one's coming to see. I mean, rarely, if you do something where people are interested in, they're going to come and say, I'll take a gander. I mean, we wouldn't go and see just a random musical about some kid being beat up. But now you throw in, that it's the Karate Kid. Now we're interested. Now we want to go and see. So it's
Yeah.
standard stuff.
We've got that connection there. We have one of our viewers here, Dan Strickland, makes a pretty interesting comment. He says, music, though, kata, sparring are about tempo, rhythm, and breathing. So, in a way, karate could already have like a musical value to it. And he believes that a lot of good musicians could be good martial artists. So, that's an interesting way to look at it. So, maybe there's some sort of implementation of kata. I mean, kata wasn't really a big role in the movie, but it doesn't mean it can't be in the musical as well.
True. I mean that is true with the tempo and stuff. that especially if we're talking about music and dance, since they're more in touch with their movements and and choreographing, which makes it easier for them to translate it over to the martial arts, versus if you're just doing, performing, singing, you don't have that same connection. So that'd be
Right.
interesting to see. I'm really curious to see it. So
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, let us know what you guys think. The Karate Kid the musical coming to Broadway. Is it a good idea? Is it just more nostalgia factor? What do you guys think? Let us know. If you're watching this back on YouTube later, just let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll cover this more in the future topic. But I think it's time to kind of get on to our main topic. I think we have enough people kind of chomping at the bit for this, and this is going to get interesting. So we are going to talk about what we're all here for: is whether or not the martial arts belong in prisons. So this was actually interesting. We put up a poll a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to see where people stood on the topic. And so we just basically said, should martial arts be allowed or taught in prison? And we're gonna go ahead and bring up the results right now, just so we could take a look at it. But it's as of now, as of the time of this stream, it says that 40% of our viewers say yes, should be allowed in prison. 60% of our viewers say no. And what I find really interesting about this is normally when we put polls out, the numbers will fluctuate. Like we'll see a heavy shift towards yes, a heavy shift towards no. We'll see a wild swing. This never did. This poll kind of started out at like 39 yes, 61% no, and it only kind of wavered about 3 percentage points at most, but it pretty much locked here. So, what is your impression of just the initial poll results, the reaction to this question?
basically, my reaction is, well, I mean, that pretty much answers it. That people feel that prisoners do not need to study martial arts. I guess also it makes them feel that martial arts, they automatically feel that it's more of a deadlier, not deadlier, but it's almost as a giving a prisoner a weapon. I have a funny feeling that's what most people feel. That's what's going on, is that it actually increases the chances of violence. And that's my gut feeling of it. And I can see that being the first gut feeling. Like, I do not want to give a prisoner more chances of doing violence and everything. I mean, what do you read by the first reactions here?
I'm actually a little bit surprised. There's actually a lot more people that said yes than I expected there to be. I thought it was going to be wildly unbalanced. This actually kind of triggered the thought because I actually came across an article. There's in the UK, apparently they had boxing programs that were in prison, and the politicians came in, they put a ban on it, and there's been a struggle back and forth between that. And the debate is raging over there whether or not they should bring that program back, and that got me thinking. It's like, well, yeah, I mean that it's a double-edged sword. But I do believe that there's a lot of gray area, and maybe that's why the poll is a little bit closer than what I expected. Like I thought we were going to have like a 20% yes, 80% no sort of balance. But I want to read off just a couple of basic points of what some of the people that said yes, what their inclinations were. A lot of people said that people have had life improvements through the martial arts, so martial arts is definitely great for that. Many people felt that yes, there should be martial arts in prison, but only if it's kata or tai chi or something more on the pacifist side. They say yes, it's because it's life changing, and if you can change one person's life through it, then it's worth it. Martial arts makes us better people, and prisons are supposed to be about rehab anyway, even though they're treated like a punishment system. Martial arts is also a way to rehabilitate oneself. It brings balance to body, mind, and spirit. It might even serve as confrontation prevention. A lot of people in the martial arts, they learn conflict resolution. I mean, we're talking about a different environment, so I'm not sure how well that plays in there. But then something else was really interesting too is some people were saying, and I'm curious if there's any statistics out there that we can look up. A lot of people commented that when martial art programs and boxing programs were allowed in prison, that they saw a sharp decline in stabbings or violence outside, that this provided an outlet. So I thought these were a lot of really good points. And just kind of curious, what are your impressions on these points, like the positives? Like, what do you think comes to mind from that?
Well, my thinking of the points are, a lot of them are valid and actually interesting points. My first reaction, like I said, is like, whoa, wait a minute, you don't want to be teaching people. But once again, there's a lot of people that go to prison for multiple reasons. Not everyone goes to prison for violent crimes, and not everyone should go to prison. That's a whole different story with America about everyone going to prison. But also too is, some people go to prison because of robbery, theft, non-violent violent crimes. And I think actually having something that gets them stimulated into a culture or something that they didn't have before is actually a great thing. If it's through art, music, dance, or even martial art. Because I mean, I'm a big proponent for that. Martial art can definitely change someone's life. So yeah, I absolutely do believe that martial arts even teaching. But the other thing too is, I also look at it the other way, which the guy was talking about, that when prisons had some sort of martial art program or boxing program, the stabbings went down. I also thinking about the people that go to prisons that not go because they're nonviolent, and they're in with violent people, and they feel threatened, they feel in danger, that they will lash out more aggressively with weapons. They will, we all heard the whole stereotype of, first day you go to prison, you find the biggest guy in the room and you beat him up. So that was there. But if you know how to defend yourself, I find it that you're the person that feels more comfortable, because you're not as threatened knowing around of other people around you that may be violent towards you. You don't feel that you need to necessarily carry a knife, or a shiv in that case, every place you go, because you know how to handle yourself and defend yourself. Also too is, reports to, prisoners against prison guards. That's a whole other story too. If they use it against, let's say, prison guards, my question is, we should have, adequate prison guards in there that they'll never be threatened. Because if one person can threaten a prison guard, then I'm like, hey, we should have more prison guards in there, so that never becomes an issue. So
Yeah. We got a couple of interesting comments here. Dan Strickland says that he thinks a lot of people have very little experience with prison and prisoners, so they tend to speak from stereotypes that might not represent reality. And I think that's actually a great perspective. I mean, no matter how much you and I talk about this and we kind of contemplate the topic, is we don't have the experience of being there. We don't know the environment firsthand. So this is all just kind of subjective thinking, and what, trying to look at it, the topic from all angles. But I think he's absolutely right. There's a lot of people, and maybe that reflected in the comments as well too, that don't have the experience with the prison system and might be speaking on that gut reaction or whatever stereotypes. And like you said, it was pretty obvious that a lot of the assumptions were violent criminals. Because when you think of, I mean, what is the number one word that comes to your mind when you hear of a convicted prisoner? Like what
yeah,
image pops in your head?
Yeah, very violent gang person in a gang, person that's tended to violence. Your standard, yeah. I mean, we all have seen the shows, HBO Oz, Orange is the New Black. So we always predict the worst of people. But I mean, also too is, I heard once from a prison guard, he mentioned the fact is, the one reason that they give all the perks to prisoners is, the fact is, if you're in prison and you have nothing to look forward to every day, then you're going to be more violent, more basically be more out of control, versus if you have a lot of things such as art classes and different recreational things to go to, because you're going to keep you busy instead of idle hands. But also too is, it gives a tool for the corrections or the guards to take away those things as punishment. So a little more controlling issue.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Now we also have a comment here from my wife Tracy. Hi Tracy. She mentions that she says the mediation kata aspect would, I think, help with emotional fortitude, anger, and management and respect. And she said that when mediation is introduced to children's school detention programs, the students in school and home behavioral issues improved in test programs. And that's actually true, because the little bit of experience that I've taught, again, this is different than the prison system, but just teaching in school with kids, there were a lot of kids that came through that had a lot of problems, whether they be at home or behavioral issues or whatever struggles were going on. and we did see an improvement through the martial arts. And it wasn't always about teaching them how to fight, but just getting them to focus on something, finding a rhythm, finding a path to put that energy into can sometimes be a benefit. And we definitely saw that. So maybe that is an aspect that could play a role in the prison system as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, basically anything that can connect with somebody. And also too is let's also face it too, a few people, even people that end up in prison, they're usually more type A type of people, more aggressive, more manly in the male prisons, or even I don't even know the female prisons even, but more aggressive, more type A. Having an outlet where that you actually get to channel some of that actual aspect of it into some positive reinforcement versus negative might actually be a good thing.
I absolutely agree with that. And I do want to read one particular message because I thought this touched on a lot of different talking points we're going to get into. So, Donald King actually responded to the poll, and he said, having worked in the penal system, the amount of hand-to-hand self-defense martial art training for corrections officers is in many instances woefully lacking in substance and availability. Therefore, it makes this question an irresponsible one unless and only if the question is applied to better training strictly for corrections officers. Why, in the name of common sense, would anybody want to provide martial training of any quality or quantity that would give its practitioner, in this case an offender, an obvious edge of resistance? In closing, my suggestion would be that for any well-meaning established instructor in any discipline to first apply for and be employed as a corrections officer, but then don't be satisfied to work in a trustee dorm area, but however, ask to be stationed in an administrative lockdown, and only then you'll experience the answer to this ridiculous question. I think there is an awful lot of meat on those bones, and I think many of those points are extremely valid and worth talking about. And we're definitely gonna have a chance to break down to all of that. But what was your thought on that overall reaction?
Well, basically, that right there is that we are not training our guards properly. That the fact that they do not get martial art training of some sort of self defense is kind of scary and shows a problem automatically right there.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. So, all right, so we're going to start breaking down some topics because there's a lot of points that brought up. Our viewers are bringing up points. There was a lot of comments in the poll, so we're definitely going to let's get into the meat of the discussion. If you are just finding this now on YouTube, if you're watching this clip playback, then we're actually going to challenge your views on the subject, whether you're for or against it. So we're going to have a lot to talk about. So click on the link right here if you're watching this later and jump in. I want to hear your comments, and let's break this sucker down. So, yeah, I think the first thing I'd like to address is basically you already brought up is not every person in prison is a violent offender. There are many reasons a person can go to jail. I mean, we've got drug abuse, property crimes, DUIs, disorderly conduct, violation of liquor laws, public drunkenness, burglary, vandalism, fraud, weapons. I mean, the list goes on. And not every one of those people are going to be violent offenders. So I think we have to get past that first stereotype, and I think that might be why so many people said no. Is like, so the first thing that comes to mind is violent criminals. But how many people in the prison system, at least in the United States, do you think are actually violent criminals?
I quite honestly, I can't even know what the actual breakdown is. I also know from different lawyers and stuff, the one problem too, which I do agree that it's a problem about teaching any people go to prison martial art. You may be a violent person, but you may go to jail for non-violent because you plead, because even though you did something violent, say you did do an assault and battery, a robbery, and you robbed someone and you actually assaulted them. You may take a deal where you take a plea deal where you just get charged with the robbery, but you don't get evicted for the assault and battery. Then you're still going to prison as considered non-violent, but you're actually a violent person. So there's that complex, layer or two on top of it.
Yeah, and I want to address through the whole thing about and you said it as well about maybe we should be training our prison guards more, because the comment really stood out to me when he said that the talking point was the majority of corrections officers are woefully lacking in substance and availability as far as martial arts training. That might be something worth changing, because a lot of these officers are working with violent criminals, especially if you're in maximum security. So they should be provided with adequate training if something breaks out. And unfortunately, that wasn't the only comment like that. And how do we fix that? How do we introduce a program into? I mean, first you got the question of what kind of art to teach them. I mean, there's a lot of different arts. What's appropriate? How do you establish it? How do you prepare these officers more than just basic training to handle a situation like this?
What art I would, oh, that's a good question. The only, I guess the real thing is why I'm kind of hesitant to actually even suggest is for what the commenter said, is that I'm not a prison guard. I haven't been, in the cell blocks. I don't know what it takes to actually, what are we, looking at here? We're looking at 1-on-1. Are we looking at 1-on-3? Do you are we talking about, does the prison guards have batons, basic weapons on them, or do they not carry them on? I don't know what's going on. So that's where it gets a little tricky to actually guess what, to put anything. But yeah, honestly, with police, prison guards, all that, I have always felt that we have basically been lacking training them properly into hand-to-hand combat, and that I think as a culture that we need to actually start to really to look into what are some of the better methods and actually put together. Everything seems to be a little bit, ad hoc here and there, and every police station and every county and every state and every country have their own ways of training, which is fine in some sense, but we need to have some sort of basic standard of, especially, just the basic interest, how do you defend yourself? How what do you do with a criminal? I mean, everything is just kind of all over the map. At least with the military, in some aspects, they kind of have their very basic, and even the military, I find lacking in hand-to-hand combat too. But they still have their, here's your baselines. At least having a baseline would actually be beneficial.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And it's yeah, you have to have the baseline, but then also how do you regulate it? Like so I personally knew a person who was in our class years ago. He was a corrections officer. He worked with maximum security, and he was a black belt. But the thing though is, you have his personality. He was a little bit on the abusive side. Like he would purposely do things. And he would come to class bragging. Now we're taking his word for it, but he would brag about how he snuck this cheap shot in here, how he got the kidney shot in there. Like he was kind of practicing stuff on, like he was almost waiting for a prisoner to resist so he could do stuff to them. So I mean, there's also I think an accountability there as well. I mean, if you're going to arm officers, I mean, if the fear is arming prisoners, I think we should have somewhat of a similar. Responsibility with the officers too, to make sure that there is accountability for what they do, because you are in a potentially violent situation. So whatever training programs that are put in place, I think there needs to be heavy supervision and accountability on both sides of it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there definitely has to be some sort of accountability for both sides. But at least that's the thing, is that's the problem I find right now, is that everyone is all the prison guards and even the police in some aspects are, everything is it is so isolated in their general training. It's kind of hard to know, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate force, you know. And that's where I think the problem comes into. So if we sort of have kind of a, I almost would say someone come up with basically a martial art just dedicated for police officers, and have some sort of thing that it goes across, which, you know, restraining, holding, grabbing, and also how because that's the other problem too, is people think it's easy to be, to restrain and hold someone when it's 5 police officers and 1 person. That actually takes skill too. That takes skill so that you don't get hurt, because you're all piling on someone and you don't hurt the suspect, or you even, which is really easy to, is hurt one of the other officers or one of the correctional officers when you're trying to take on the person. So having something where even that would be an actual training. How does everyone respond when it's on the line, when it's actually go time? would actually be beneficial, I believe.
Right.
But once again, I am not a correctional officer, and I've never been to prison, so I cannot judge, what's happening in prisons. And bottom line, all I can say is that, yeah, we have not gave the correctional officers the tools and resources properly what they need. And I believe that we need to give them, better training. I believe we need to give them more resources. I believe we even need more officers. I feel that the correctional officers should never have a time feel that they are in danger at any point in time. And so just that, the reading where he's saying that he feels in danger. So in that sense, without saying redoing all of our jail system and redoing everything over again, it might not be the best attention to train them for martial arts. But no, the question though is, what about like more of a sports side to have them do, such as in boxing? That would be kind of the question.
Right. And we actually have one of our viewers here, Scorch 1028. He mentions that the original curriculum for the Shaolin monks was more exercise oriented than self-defense oriented. What if the same approach were taken to prisons today? And a lot of people did mention that there was a big caveat or a big conditional on, martial arts is such a blanket term. I mean, that can include so many different things. It doesn't have to include combat. It doesn't have to include fighting or self-defense. There's a lot of mental aspects to it. A lot of people were suggesting they would be in support of a system as long as it was something like Tai Chi or Aikido or something along the pacifist line. But what about any art that just focuses on the kata, just the concentration, more of a way of life and discipline versus the combat side of it? I mean, I think that's a big conditional that could really sway the argument one way or the other.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I think anything that the correction officers or who's ever basically in charge of trying to get people to give them something to go beyond, to help them to enrich their lives is huge. I mean, martial arts and kung fu has been so a huge part of my life. I can't imagine taking that away. And that, I guess, is the hard thing for me to look at it as someone taking something away from your life that, how that would affect me, and what would I do to earn that back? So that's where I'm looking at it from, because I can't put myself in the other person's shoes because I haven't been experiencing being a corrections, work in a prison or anything along those lines. So yeah, I mean, if we can teach, if it helps, if Tai Chi helps them to calm down and center themselves, to center people, I'm all for it.
Yeah, because and we have Dan Strickland's mentioning, why would you not de-escalate? Why would you want to fight? And there's a lot of de-escalation techniques that come with the martial arts, and maybe we'll do this for a future video. But I actually saw a clip a while back, a man who diffused a street fight. It was a street fight happening in front of a pizzeria. The owner came out with a pie and gave it to the guys, and they stopped fighting, and then they just kind of cooled down. But there's a lot of different ways, some unexpected ways, that we could actually de-escalate situations. Do you think that in a prison environment that there could be an opportunity there, or do you think, like you said, the testosterone is so high that the it's just it's more of a hot plate? Do you think that there's more opportunities to de-escalate the situation before it even gets to the point of violence?
Well, yeah, I mean, so to give some background is I have a child. My youngest child she's on the spectrum, but she also has huge, basically I don't know how to properly say this. Basically, she has high anxiety, really high anxiety. So when a situation comes up and her anxiety flares up for no apparent reason, it's the weirdest mundane things because we can't understand it. Her fight and flight just kicks in full floor. She automatically, every little situation, she puts it, her life is in danger. That's what happens. She's either trying to run away and escape as fast as she can from whatever situation, or she tries to fight anyone around. So we've been dealing with this for about 5 years now. And so, to learn, so it's the weirdest things to find someone who's automatically so threatened. When you have that moment, when you feel threatened and your fight and flight kicks on, when you literally feel that, oh, I have to fight to stay alive, that you're beyond the point of reason, the weirdest things will actually calm down. And one of the techniques, like, believe it or not, is I fart. And that sounds strange, but it breaks her. And that's really one of those things that you just get that little chuckle. You have that thing where it just stops someone for 10 seconds, and you just need them to think for 10 seconds, because they're running fully on basically just on instinct, 100% on instinct. And you need to stop it for just even 3 seconds for them to, and their entire point of view will change in that 3 seconds. So,
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah. So, I mean, it's the weirdest thing. So like there's been times like dealing with my daughter to calm her down, is like, you would never imagine this when she's ready to fight and she's throwing things, that you turn her back, and you sit down and you turn her back. But you think that, someone that can't control themselves at that point in time, that would be aggressive, that if you turn their back, that would be dangerous. But it's keys to them. You're not a danger. You're not threatening to them. So they're just calming down. So when it comes to that aspect of can't even say it. De-escalation. Yeah. It's a very strange psychological thing. I mean, I've learned so much through so many different therapists and psychologists that we've been to over the years talking about it. It's one of those things that you could take classes on, de-escalation, but it's not what you think. De-escalate, usually when it comes to de-escalation, the first gut reaction of a person is not necessarily the correct reaction, because we're actually not geared up for survival to de-escalate. Our survival is, engage,
fight or
fight.
Flight. Yeah.
We're used to fighting for our lives. And now,
and of course, any de-escalation attempts too, like you're talking about, you turn around, you turn your back to her. That works with her, but that might not work with somebody else.
Oh,
so
yeah,
now you have the
absolutely
aspect of, you need to know each individual person psychologically and what will or won't work, because what works on one person won't work with someone else necessarily.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't. And it's one of those things that doesn't work on the time, because there's even with her, there's a 1,000 different ways that things go off, and you just have to kind of feel it out and feel out what, it's just like anything else. Every fight is different. So, you have your basic tools, but yeah, I mean, you have to kind of just get in and figure it out. And it is hard. So so when it comes to that, that's, honestly, we could have people have degrees on how to do that, and just go around and teach, officers and correctional, and honestly, even go on and teach classes of that just in prisons to prisoners, because a lot of times because I find it sometimes is that people don't know that they're making it worse than trying to de-escalate, that they're actually increasing the violence, increasing the intensity, and they just don't understand what they're doing, and they're trying to de-escalate. So, well, I mean, I do that from personal experience. For many years, I was doing it wrong, into trial and error, and people, finally people who knew what they're talking about to actually help me through it, so that I can actually help my daughter through her problems. So,
yeah. Jack Mackinson is asking, he goes, are we talking about training guards and police officers with martial arts, or prisoners teaching prisoners martial arts? I kind of want to leave this open. I think it's across the board. I think it's worth looking at teaching prisoners martial arts through an external program, or maybe exemplary prisoners that might have experience, because sometimes there's leadership roles you can take place. So if you do have a prisoner that has experience and maybe they're not in there for a violent crime, but they, there's ways prisoners can earn points or earn good behavior, but maybe being part of a program and mentoring other prisoners could be an option. We're talking about guards and police officers being trained. So the topic is really open right now. So we're just talking about, just in general, what role can martial arts have in the prison system, whether it be for the guards, or the prisoners, or even for fighting, or just for kata. And I kind of want to circle back to now the topic of people. Okay, let's say we do include a sparring aspect in there, a combat aspect in there. You mentioned boxing because it was a good sport aspect. It can be controlled. And what are your thoughts on prisoners having an outlet for this versus, if they've got to beef with each other, there's an organized, relatively safe way to work that out as opposed to, stabbing or doing personal attacks in private later?
Yeah, well, that's what I would be hoping is that with something such as boxing, because the thing with boxing is, yes, it is a martial art, and yes, it can help you into fightings. But on the same point too is, if we have a program that's basically more sport based, you have gloves, you have referees, you have a ring, and you put the prisoners in that have a beef. They're not going to have to throw a riot. They're not going to have to throw things. They can get in the ring and beat it out of each other. And if you have someone there that can basically, judge it, it keeps it somewhat, I would say, safe. But also too is it burns off a lot of energy. So, gets a lot of your aggression out after you get in the ring for 3 rounds and getting your face punched in 150 times. You're kind of not as basically full of yourself afterwards. So yeah. I think something of boxing might be one of those things that actually help out for prisoners, and it gives an activity for them to actually work for and do. I think that would be something to look into.
Mm-hmm. How? Well, this raises the question too, because let's look at this. What do prisons currently have? They've got workout equipment. Prisoners are allowed to exercise and work out. So you have somebody who's got the opportunity to get in shape and get stronger, and if they already have violent tendencies anyway, are you really going to teach them anything that's going to make them worse than they already are, or could that be more towards benefiting them, focusing on energy? Because you're not going to stop a violent person from being violent just because you put them through a program once or something. I mean, there's a lot of nature nurture argument there, but they already have access to physical fitness and workout equipment and getting themselves stronger anyway. So if the person's violent, are they not already a threat anyway?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good question. If they're already violent, but also too, as it comes to the point at that point in time, how violent are they? Was there tendencies? But yeah, I mean, I would love to see what it would be, to actually study about doing something like boxing or some sort of sport side of it, and see if it actually, what it does to the effect of the morale of different prisoners. And even to be kind of curious to see what it would do for some of the violent people, see if it actually does have an outlet, of their aggression and their hatred, to put it out there.
And actually, a little bit of mental focus.
Yeah, mental focus, but give them something else more than just basically, I'm going to stab you versus,
let them hit a heavy bag.
Yeah, because even let's say even if they learn, let's say, Taekwondo and do point sparring, that would be interesting too. And that one gets a little interesting in debate exactly. Is that teaching them too much or not teaching them enough? But it's Olympic sport. It's you could still have a referee. You can still have a point. So it might be one of those things to focus. Because also the other thing too is how many prisoners know martial arts before or know how to fight before going to prison, and that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, should we teach the guards martial arts with the one thing? I believe everyone should learn martial arts just to learn martial arts. So I'm kind of biased in that fact.
Yeah, no, that's actually an excellent point too, because how many people already know? Because martial arts aren't the exotic, obscure knowledge today as they were 50 years ago. A lot of people know martial arts, and especially if it is a person who grew up in a rough environment and has a history of violence, they're most likely going to know how to fight, at least in the street fighting efficient sort of way too, which is in a way is kind of a raw martial art in itself. So they're already going to come in with some of this knowledge potentially.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask a question too: is what about prisoners who might not be violent, that probably non-violent, but smaller prisoners that might have to defend themselves against other larger inmates?
Yeah.
I mean, should there be something put into place to help them at least learn, whether it be de-escalation or some escape tactics or something, just because if they're
that's the actual question. There is, if you taught someone who basically is not a violent criminal at all, has any violent past, and you actually teach them martial arts, would they then be more comfortable in prison, that they won't necessarily feel that their life is threatened all the time? Where they feel that the first thing they're going to be when they get to prison, I need to get a shiv because I have to protect myself? Or will they feel more confident in themselves? I had a friend that he was a police officer, but he was an ex-Marine, and like he said, is that when he went to tough situations, he felt more confident than the other police officers that never were in action, because he went to combat. He actually was in Iraq, so he felt more confident because he's like, I've seen the worst. I've been shot at by dozens of people. What is one guy more? So there's that kind of balance too. So if you give someone some knowledge, some experience, that they'll feel less threatened, they'll feel less jumpy.
Yeah. So we've got Tracy who mentions, she says, we're talking about a diverse prison community / population who have differing levels of emotional intelligence, which definitely plays the part of to determining who you could teach what to. And that comes down to psychologically knowing each individual inmate. And Dan Strickland makes a comment on, we're talking about prisoners who might be in the rough areas and come into the prison system with martial arts. He says, what access to martial arts if you're poor? Or if you live in the poor neighborhood, what access do you have to martial arts? And surprisingly, there's quite a bit of access, because not every school, is a storefront, large, expensive school. I mean, there's a lot of, I know personally, a lot of people who run schools in low income areas, and boxing gyms are common, and then just there's people who will just train each other, and street fighting itself becomes an art. And there's especially like with Wing Chun back in the days, it wasn't taught in these big fancy schools. Where was it taught? Rooftops, basements, behind stores. It was private gatherings. So you'd be surprised, I think, how many people do have access to martial arts regardless of what income level you have.
Yes, but it also brings up, he kind of makes me bring up a good point too, is the thing that really matters is how would you actually facilitate such a program? Are you going to have prison guards teach him, as I think one of the other comments have mentioned it, or are you going to have prisoners teach it? So and then what is the qualifications and stuff? So when you get into that aspect of it, the actual logistic side, that's where it gets a little more complicated. Because any program that you start in a prison is going to be basically cost money. It's money and time. Because even if you run whatever you run, you're going to have guards to watch them. You're going to have an area to hold it. You're going to have some equipment. I mean, even if it's basic, you're going to have some equipment so people are not hurting themselves. So that's kind of the question. Even if it's punching bags and ropes, when are you going to do it? How are you going to do it?
Right.
So,
which goes back to the question I think Tracy brought up about a lot of prison systems are underfunded to begin with. And then let's throw another wrench into this. Not every prison's a public prison. There's a lot of, private prisons where I hate to say it, the focus isn't necessarily on rehabilitation. It's all on just numbers and getting funding for those numbers. And they might not want to invest in additional extracurricular activities because it costs money.
Yeah. And that's where it gets into the complicated thing. I mean, it would be one thing to say, very easy for us to say, hey, let's have where prisoners kind of teach the other prisoners, but what is their qualifications? Are how are they teaching them? So if you have an outside teacher to come in to actually teach these people, where they have more of their idea is to teach them something to enlighten their life and to actually get in touch with the more spiritual side and the more how de-escalate. Or if you have another prisoner just randomly teach them that is violent, it's like, hey, let me show you how you can take someone down when no one's looking. I mean, yeah, so that is complicated, and it's not that's not an easy answer in that sense of actually how do you do this. But it still always comes back to me is, like I said, martial arts been a big thing in my life. I found a lot of actual experience and a lot of calmness from it, especially and coming from a Wing Chun background where, where we end up doing our first form for 45 minutes, just slowly, very much a thing about meditation, quiet the mind. So on that aspect of it, I think it can benefit everybody and anybody. So I'm a little biased, So it's kind of like saying, cook, should everyone have a great meal? Well, yeah.
Complex Blackness mentions, he says, if you teach it to prisoners, then you would have to teach it to the guards, and also those classes would be ripe for inmates to pass things like drugs and weapons, etc. And that's actually another good thing too, because there would be a class size, or yes, whenever you have prisoners congregate, there is an opportunity there to pass around contraband, or like you said, you don't ever want to have a situation where a guard would feel that their life is in danger. So there would have to be, I guess, systems in place to regulate who's in the class, how many people are in the class, how many guards are in the class, how the classes themselves are structured, in addition to what kind of material you're going to teach them.
Oh yeah, that's the problem is now we're starting to get into the whole prison system of the United States prison system, which is complex and it's almost to the point of unmanageable because it's so complex. Mm-hmm. It's so huge. There's so many different variables, and every state gets to say their own thing, and even every county has their own rules and lines, and I mean, and there's different type of prisons, and oh my god, I mean, that is so complex in its own. So that is a level where I can't quite answer. And yeah, I mean, you have any gatheration, I absolutely, but that brings up another thing too, is just the amount of contraband in prison is for the average person is incomprehensible. How much contraband? Yeah, it's just like how is this? How so yeah, there's a lot of problems with anything when it comes to American prison systems.
Yeah. Armis23 is asking, she says, here's a good question. Most people are thinking about male prisoners, and what about female prisoners? I don't have the clips to show. I did come across clips, though. There's quite a bit of nasty fights in women's prisons, too. Like, just because they're women doesn't mean that they can't fight and there's no violence. It could be quite, from my understanding, quite a volatile environment itself. So I think that the topic, kind of applies equally to both sides, because it's not just the men who are violent. There are plenty of violent female prisoners as well. And I think the benefits and the risks I would kind of guess are even on both sides.
Yeah, I would imagine so too. Honestly, in some things, I would actually predict the women's would be a little more violent and than men, because sometimes men are more show off their violence. They're more,
posturing.
Yeah, posturing. They're more, women when they're mad, it's kind of this under rage. They get back at you, and they don't care if you know or not know. They're just getting back at you. So I would imagine that in some aspects the females are even worse for violence than men. It's just They're more under the radar than men. Men, if they're going to beat you up, they want to beat you up right in front of everybody. They want everyone to know I'm the one that beat you up. So
Mhm.
everyone knows and everyone sees it. It's more, hey, women, it's kind of one of those things where they'll stab you. You don't even know what happened.
Tracy mentions lower security prisoners. Lower security prisons have work programs that will send prisoners out for work or community service, and they're often unsupervised. That's actually a great question too, because if a person or if a prisoner would qualify for a program like that, if you're already sending them out into public areas or putting them to work or doing an activity, why not include martial arts in that activity as well? And I actually want to segue this into another topic someone mentioned. One person believe that yes, absolutely, prison or martial arts should be taught in prison. The discipline/reward system martial arts ingrained in the individual would probably cut down on the recidivism which the prison system creates. So, is martial arts a potential way to break a bad cycle, break a bad habit? Whether it gives a person direction or it gives them something else to focus on, or an outlet for aggression, could martial arts be a way for prisoners to break a cycle that's self-destructive?
Absolutely. I mean, I actually think once you're actually out of prison and you're actually doing the transition, I think it's a great foundation for people. It's a great place to bond and meet communities. It's a great place to actually then refocus your energy. Also, too, is let's also face it too. If you're out of prison, you're not going to get a lot of jobs,
Yeah.
and and martial art might be a thing for them to actually teach, and be an instructor might be a great job program for them to teach. The beginning martial artist. Not, and maybe I'm not saying teach kids, but teaching some couple adult classes. But it actually might give them the responsibility and the commitment that people need.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody. Definitely not.
No, and that actually you just reminded me of I like this comment, and I don't like I said this wouldn't work in every situation, but um one person commented, honestly, yes, from what I understand in Thailand, some prisons have Muay Thai programs where select fighters can compete with volunteer fighters or other prisons, and for each fight they win, they reduce their sentence, and most of those prisoners will go on to have a fighter's career or coached. And he thinks that maybe the same thing was done with boxing in Mexico as well. But that is interesting too, is it could, maybe on a smaller margin, set up a potential career path. Like you said, maybe whether they go out there and they start teaching independently, or if they, depending on the crime, they can open up their own school, or maybe they could become a competitive fighter, earn some pride, earn it gives some potential career opportunity there as well.
Oh yeah, I think so. Especially with, like I said, especially with the things such as boxing, where it's a lot more established, is a lot more built up. Um, in and of course, the one problem too is, right now in America, boxing is on the decline compared to mixed martial arts. And I don't know about you. I'm not sure if I feel, you know but I guess on the same point too is, martial arts or martial arts, as long as it's how it's taught. So if you teach people mixed martial arts, it might be a good career move for them. I mean, like I said, are you going to hire them in your shop, in your restaurant, your grocery stores? Are you going to hire them, or would you, but they need jobs. They have to work. They have to put food on their table, and some of them have families. So
Mm-hmm.
what's a good thing for them to, and I'm actually talking about the people that tend to be violent.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know they're never gonna, if people are violent, they're not gonna, what are they gonna do, all of a sudden be a accountant and sit down and start doing tax forms?
no. And if they have a tendency for that violence, that's going to be part of a cycle too. So why not? I mean, if the person can handle it, give them
Yes.
another
Oh yeah.
outlet for that.
Yeah, that is, yeah, and that's a huge thing, is if they can handle it. And I'm not the one to necessarily judge if someone can handle it or not. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I keep coming back to it, and like I said, I cannot see it not being part of my life and other people's lives. I know, Dan, you for a fact too, is that you martial arts, if it wasn't in your life, how would that make you feel? And more, especially when you're a kid and you're kid for the, and being a teenager going through your time,
Yeah.
how much guidance did the martial arts bring you and show you and give you a guidance path?
A
So
lot.
exactly. So that's where it's kind of hard for us to agree, because it's gave us such a path, such a discipline to actually, to go down. It's kind of hard to say, let's not spread that to other people. That's where I'm biased against. So
Yeah. Now, here's a boilerplate question, and you kind of touched on it when you kind of hesitated with the MMA part of it. What arts would be appropriate to teach in prisons? Because there's a lot to choose from.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's oh god.
Now, of course, we have a lot of variables in this. Of course, depending on who you're
I'm
teaching to and the conditions. But what arts do we bring in?
Yeah, I'm really on the fence. Like, let's say if you have everything straightened out and you're trying to teach someone, I'm really on the fence about mixed martial arts, but I kind of leaning towards yes, because it's a very popular sport, and it is a sport that's growing right now, and it gives them so like if it's something that they can learn and then go in the ring and participate immediately with, so they can, it has direct, I guess, I don't know how to say it, but it has direct call to action for it. They can do it. They can run out. They can go ahead and, and participate.
They can apply it right away.
Yeah, apply it right away. That's the bottom line.
You start off sparring, basically. I mean, you're already in the mix of things. You just use whatever little bit you've learned, but you just keep adding to it. Versus a lot of arts where you've got to train for months and months before you're proficient enough that you can even apply it in the sparring setting.
That is very true too. Yeah, I mean, there's so many martial arts. I'm trying to think of it. I'm blank. My mind is blanks when it comes to it. But
yeah. Well,
there's so many martial arts that like you have to train over and over again before you show any results. And so
now, when it comes to like guards and what they're learning, I mean, definitely some sort of a grappling, especially if there's multiple guards. But you want, like you mentioned before, the restraint. I know a lot of police officers will train in jiu-jitsu and judo and some basic takedowns. They're not strike oriented as much, but takedown, restraint, submission. So I definitely think that should be a part of it. Now, as far as the prisoner side of it, I kind of like what you're saying. I like going the boxing route. I like the MMA route, and maybe even give them traditional arts like kung fu, or karate, or wing chun, something traditional if they want to devote themselves. If they want to do more than just fight it out, give them something with more substance too that they can dedicate themselves to.
Well, especially even with the kung fu, there's a lot of schools I know in kung fu that don't even do sparring, because they more do form based, and they do competitions in form based and performance. So I mean, there's even that aspect. We keep always thinking about martial arts as in the actual, that it's violent in its nature, but I remember there was around here there was a martial art that was Tiger Claw, and they didn't spar at all, and they didn't do any competitions that were point based or anything. They didn't contact anyone. It was all just for the spectacle of it, I would say. So I mean, there's even that aspect of it that you can show them and teach people. Just to learn them, just to concentrate and control your body. So
well, let's ask this question now too. So I think we have a pretty good mix. We've heard from a lot of viewers for the yeses and nos. Let's see. Armis says, I'm a prison guard. What we have to use on the inside is so restrictive on what we're allowed to do unless our life is in danger, and then we have all the tools in our bag. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely rules in place, because I mean, I think police officers have the same thing. They can't just go out and just start pummeling a suspect. There's certain rules with putting their hands on someone, and then there's that line of when their life is in danger. As far as teaching guards, as long as there's good supervision and proper teaching, I think the guards should learn whatever they can learn, whether it be a boxing or a striking art or a takedown art, jiu-jitsu, whatever they can have in their arsenal, as long as it's properly trained and there's accountability there. I think the guards should have every tool available to them.
Yes, I believe so too. I actually still believe that even the problem that I find with martial arts, like I believe martial arts will help out anyone in most any situations, even if you're a teacher or or a auto detailer. Martial arts will help you out. But I believe guards, the one problem is, and even police officers, I still think that there needs to be a martial art that's kind of geared more for them and their particular niche and needs. Exactly how that gets into, like I said, I'm not a guard, I'm not a cop, but most martial arts, it's on the premise it's you versus them, and it's a fight to break someone's will. You engage them as opponent, you gauge it one-on-one. It doesn't teach you what you need. It's kind of done in the, I would say, the MMA style, where you're almost in a ring, and that's just not what police officers have. That's not what guards have. you know
Yeah.
they're in a very different situation. you know like what I found was, is like in the military, they actually teach you how to use your weapon as not even like as a weapon, as a tool to push off, as to actually hit them with the nuzzles, how to throw them off, how to, when you're actually, you keep your when you're engaging someone, you actually keep your weapon side away from them. When you're rolling and stuff, how you move your arm back with the gun so you keep it out of their hands. Things along those lines, you're not going to find in most martial arts, traditional MMA stuff, and that's the stuff they need to know.
Yeah, well, the average person going to class doesn't typically need that kind of information.
No, you don't. Yeah, you're not going to train you, but like, okay, this is where you pepper spray them.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is you want to hold them, but you want to keep them away, so when the guy behind him can tase them and that you don't get shocked. There's things like that they need to take in consideration.
Yeah. Well, it's very similar to like anyone who's in the like special forces, whatever. The military training and tactical training for weapons is going to be very, very different than what you're going to encounter in a shopping mall type school. I mean, they might teach you basic weapon defense, but never to the extent that an actual combat tactical course is going to teach you, because the average person doesn't necessarily need to know how to use a bayonet or a weapons in certain situations.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's definitely, yeah. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, what is your scenario? What's your situation? I mean, that's when you actually look at martial art as the practicality of actually, not just to learn it, to learn the spiritual side of the connection and stuff, but the actual practicality to use it, where you're going to use it, how you're going to use it, comes a big, big, big factor. And with prisons, like I said, that's where I think, once again, that that's the problem right now with a lot of things in Florida when it comes to guards and everything. Everything's kind of ad hoc. Every place has their own regulations. I mean, it's I can't imagine the amount of red tape that they have being a prison guard. Different martial arts, what you can't use and not use, and
Right.
then just, I could imagine, just down the street in Change County, it's just completely different. It's you have to learn a whole new form and stuff. So,
Yeah.
that's where I think a lot of the problems run into. So when we start talking about what should guards learn and what should guards know, I'm like, what county are you in? What are you allowed to
Exactly.
do?
Well, it's funny that you're bringing up location, because Tracy actually brings up, she goes, I think prisons are going to want to offer styles that are currently relevant to or culturally relevant to the population, since it's going to be different in every location. And I think that applies to not just the prisoners, but the guards, like you're talking about too, is where are these prisons taking place? You're talking county to county, but what about country to country? We mentioned before Thailand. Thailand's got programs where they teach the prisoners Muay Thai for that particular career path. But, in different spots of the world, different arts are popular. So that's actually a great thing to take into consideration, is there's not one blanket art that's going to work across the world. Every culture, every location are going to have what they focus on and what's going to work for them in their environment.
Oh yeah, I mean, and also too, what other resources, let's say, weapons that they have at hand. you know
Yeah.
you know
So I have a question here. So Armis is a prison guard. They say we focus a lot on pain compliance and things that will not cause any permanent damage, that have been proven not to cause any permanent or that have not been proven to cause any permanent damage. I've got a question for you, Arma. Since you are actually, I'm really happy you're in here. So you've got this experience. You've worked in the prisons. I'm going to bring up the poll again. So these were the poll results that we put up when we asked if people think martial arts should be taught in the prisons. 40% of the population or our viewers said yes. 60% said no. First, I would like to know, what is your opinion, since you actually are in the setting itself? What are your thoughts? Do you believe that martial arts should be taught in prisons or allowed in prisons? And if so, who do you think it should be? Only for guards? Should it be for prisoners, or is there a lot of conditions in place? I'm kind of curious where you stand on that, since you're actually somebody who's in the system that's with us today, and I know a few other viewers are as well. I believe Dan Strickland, you might have mentioned that. I'm not sure, but anyone who's got input from the system itself, I think, has a lot of value to offer this, because it's perspective we don't personally have. It's just what we're observing from the outside, but we're not in the thick of it. We're not dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, so we're not going to have that firsthand experience. And so, and while we're waiting for that too, honestly, the question comes into, and this is the harder question, is if you feel martial arts should be taught in prisons, what are the guidelines for it? Where are the lines in the sand that you draw versus who do you choose? What do you choose? Where do you choose it? That, Zach, you mentioned in the boxing clip when we were reviewing it the other day, that where's the space to even hold a controlled fight? It depends on, not every prison block's got an open area. So should it be in a prison yard? Should it be in a specialized room? Or, like, where are the proper locations for this?
Yeah, I mean, I would can't even answer because once again, I don't really know a prison, but yeah, that would be interesting to hear from someone who's actually prison guard. Actually be also interesting to hear is someone who actually was a prison, went to prison, to hear what their aspects of it. I can't remember her name, but there's a woman who's actually on YouTube I follow a little bit, but she basically does little videos about talking about how it was to go to prison, and how little stuff, how like what they use baby powder for and everything like that. So it would be kind of interesting to see someone on the other side what they'll think of martial arts, because on the same point too is they might look at it as like, I really don't even care. I'm just trying to get through, my time and get out as quickly as possible. So,
yeah.
I don't want to, they might say, oh, this might be a thing where, if we actually do contact, I don't want to piss anyone off. I don't want to even start anything. I want to stay below the radar. Or they might be like, no, this would be great to get back, or, and actually,
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because there was a comment from somebody, I don't remember the username, but somebody who was in the female prison, and they said that in jail, in prison, if you lose a fight, your fate is determined by how bad you lost. If you tap out too early, you're considered weak. So there's a dominant thing there, or at least a respecting there, is the more of the fight you put up, the more respect you earn, versus if you quit early. So that's a whole different dynamic right there. And there's also the point of view, if you fight at all, you are punished, so you might as well fight hard. There's penalties versus, allowed outlets. So even if it's, and I know the public school system's the same way, even if you are the victim, if you're the one attacked, if you engage in the fight, even in self-defense, you're going to be punished, period. So her comment was, if you're going to get in trouble anyway, fight as hard as you can and establish that dominance, or establish that respect line. So that's got to be rough, because that's not something that we typically deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that is true. That, usually when it comes to, we train people, you train people martial art for actual, fights and the thing, you try to end it quickly, end it fast, get out. That's the other thing too, is, a lot of, martial arts is fine. If you're in a fight, you're trying to end it quickly and get out of the danger quickly, for the practical side of it. But in prison, there's no getting it out. You're taking this fight. It's almost competitive in a sports sense, that it's a ring and people are watching you and judging you on your performance.
Yeah, and it's not like that you can just escape and go home and go about your day and forget about it. These are people you're going to keep encountering.
Yeah, that's true. Day. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's no run away and get help.
Yeah. So Armis replies. Armis says, when it comes to the prisoners, it's dependent on the prisoner. If they've been proven to be a modern model prisoners, and they want to learn, then yes, they support the program. Almost anything can be controlled to a point. We even have CrossFit classes and certification for them, so when they get out, they can start teaching CrossFit. See, that's perfect. That goes along with what you're saying. Is you're now giving someone an opportunity for a potential career path, or at least something to do. They have something to cling on to when they get out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, honestly, when your prison term is done, it's not like they don't give you a going away package or a pension or anything like that. Is they open the door, they kick you out, they gave you what you came in with, and you're on your own.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot, and while you're in there, stuff falls apart. Your job, of course, you take a loss on property value, whatever you have. I mean, you're basically starting over. So a lot of people don't have anything when they come out of prison. So maybe the martial arts could be a little bit of a lifeline to something. Last summer in Colorado, there was a CrossFit competition inside one of the prisons where Matt Frazier actually attended and helped host. See, that's fantastic. I think that's a great example of that, because now you're using it as a role model. You're using it as, I don't want to say therapeutic, but you're giving them some sort of incentive to engage in this. And also too, a prisoner who's going to engage in activity, whether it be working out or games or martial arts, they're going to be, I think, more well adjusted and maybe have better chances for success than the prisoner who's just going to sit and dwell in their cell all day too. Oh, and he's a Kempo guy. All right, Armis.
Okay.
Awesome. Thumbs up.
Of course, that's why. But yeah, I mean, actually, that's another thing too. Is it definitely could be one of those things where the guards and whoever else, the counselors and the people get to actually pick who get bees in the program, and you might use it that way. Might be one of those things where if you are good, you get to be in this program.
Yeah. Well, I think this kind of leads us to the final point. Is so if we feel yes, Michael, that's all you get, says, no, I have seen Shawshank Redemption. I know that sitting in your cell all day is how you get out faster. As long as you have a Raquel Welch poster and a rock hammer, you're good.
Exactly.
So, all right, well, let's ask the question now. So for people who do support the concept of martial arts in the prison, let's talk about, okay, it's obvious at this point, it's not such a blanket yes or no. There's a lot of, it's all gray area. So I'm just giving my impression. I will see what you think and to see what our viewers think. Because my personal opinion is I do believe that martial arts should be allowed in the prisons, but I think there should be tiers and there should be qualifications. Obviously, not every prisoner is going to qualify for this program. There are people, unfortunately, who are extremely violent, and the last thing you want to do is give them more tools to be violent with. But there's so many others that could benefit from it. So I think, okay, if someone's in maximum security or in isolation, obviously they're not the prime candidate for this. But if it's general population, or if it's non-violent crime, or even blue collar crime, whatever, or white collar, whatever, there's a lot of people who I think could. So I think there should be a qualification for people who are allowed to take it. And then the question comes into, what are you going to teach them? Is it going to be kata only? Is it going to be just meditation, or you're going to allow sparring? And maybe you have different columns of tiers. So you've got the tiers of prisoners who can participate, and then tiers of programs they can participate in, and then maybe the model prisoners who have good experience, and maybe you can give them some responsibility to train other prisoners. I think there's a lot of different multiple levels that will work, but I think overall, martial arts in the prison system to some capacity would be extremely beneficial, because, I mean, what are they doing right now? They're working out and they're fighting anyway. Let's give them an outlet. Let's give them a goal. Let's educate them properly, because, like the one person mentioned, if you turn one person's life around, is it not worth it?
Yeah.
So
my answer is like I said, I think it can benefit everyone and anyone. So that's how it goes to. The question of how you apply it to that's a big debate, and there's different ways to do it. But yes, I believe everyone. I believe anyone, people who are fighting cancer. I believe people who are actually just computer programming engineers. Martial arts will help. And yes, I believe if you're a prison, you're trying to rebuild your life, martial arts can help you, gives you the focus and give you the self-confidence to actually succeed in life. So, I always say, if anything, yes, there's rarely a few educations where I think martial arts can't help somebody in some form. So
I have to agree with that. We have a comment here from Corey Ballinger. Says he was a a correctional officer for 13 years, and there were martial arts in prisons. And you said in DOC, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what DOC is, if you can clarify that. But he says there should be martial arts in prison. The offenders need it. One of my longtime students was a student in prison as an inmate. When he got out, he still trains with me.
Oh.
In fact, if you're from Indiana, you may know some of the big names in the local kickboxing and MMA all got to start while in prison, and they stayed with it when they were released. I mean, there you go.
So yeah, that's right there. You know, and
Department of Corrections. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think there's a place for it.
Oh yeah, I think it's a big place for it, and yeah, I think it definitely can give them a career path and definitely give them something to actually shoot for and do. And I always believe, it's better to handle your beefs, your fights, your disagreements in a ring and then out on the street. So those are my 2 cents. I mean, maybe even have it where you can do actual competitions and range competitions, MMA competitions, boxing competitions, and have people, fight in a more secure. And I think it'd be interesting to even have it where you'll have prison clubs. I don't know if you can even do that, and they actually travel to different prisons and box for each other.
But why not? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If they can earn it, why not? It's just like you said, nothing but good can come from that if it's used in the proper manner. And Tracy's saying it helps increase self-confidence as well. So I'm gonna have to agree with that. So I want to ask now all of you guys out there. So what are your opinions? Looking at, so we had 40% said yes, 60% said no. If you voted in the poll, what was your original vote? And after this discussion, are you still holding to that answer, or are you now skewing the other way? I'm really curious to know what you guys think. And also, I want to bring up a comment here. Michael 𝗘𝗖𝗘𝗦𝗓 said, during his brown belt test, a student was going for his black belt, and his personal form was the prison shank form, which is actually kind of funny. I'm kind of curious. Was that really something he was forming? And was he in prison, and where was he drawing this material from, or was it just a fun concept he was playing with?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So Dan Strickland says pair martial arts with alternatives to violence programs. Maybe not require both, but have them both in the same prison. So yeah, offer them alternatives to violence, and I think martial arts definitely goes along with that. And Michael says, but there was a reason that weights were taken out of prisons in many cases. The prisoners have nothing to do all day, so they were getting huge. Many prisoners also don't want to become reformed. So how do you stop that from being more of an assistant in their crimes later or even inside? Trying to stop it with permissions doesn't mean that another prisoner won't also pass on the knowledge. How many have passed on the technique to another student? That is another great point too, because you're not going to be able to regulate. Yeah, that's actually a great point too. So even if you don't qualify for the program, who's to say that people as prisoners in the program aren't going to pass that on to the other people who are not qualified for the program? But my answer to that too is I think that happens anyway. Whatever you're passing weapons around or passing intel around, or if the person's going to be violent anyway, I don't know if this amplifies that issue or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a comedian who was in prison, and he basically talks about that. His first week there, he's like, oh, there's going to be a riot tomorrow. You need to get a what do you call it? A knife, what do you call it? A shank. You need to get a shank. And they're like, go to this guy down here. He makes all the shanks. And he said he went to him. The guy had 7 shanks he was making. So, there. So at that point in time, and supposedly on this first fight he got this huge cut down his chest, and he has this huge scar. So, that has to do with also, the quality of our prisons overall. I don't think that forms to necessarily martial arts as much as it has to do with the state of our prisons, the state of our prison funding, the lack of training that we, not equipping and training and giving the guards their proper resources that they need to actually do their job properly and safely. That has a lot to do with that, and that's a complicated and a huge problem that I can't answer. That's above.
Oh, yeah. it's a systemic change that's needed. Yeah. And so it's not just, hey, we're gonna bring in this program and everything's all hunky dory. No, it's a huge process, and it's and also with the people that
there's some people that don't want to be reformed. Yeah, some people there's some people that are too late, and that gets, as anything, there's always a group of people anywhere that are, there's nothing you can do with them, but
It doesn't
also,
matter what program they're in; it's not
yeah,
going to help.
yeah, not program are going to help. They're not,
Yeah. Well,
and the main thing about that, the main thing you're going to need to do with that is just basically identify who those people are, and but should they stop everyone else's who are trying to benefit and go through and rebuild their life? Should one person affect that? That's a good question. Is there a way that we can set up that we can, that's the whole point of prisons in the first place, is that you put people away from people in society so that they can't, influence society.
It's easy to forget about them too, but there's
Yeah.
still people in jail. And like I said, there's a lot of people in there for a lot of different reasons. They're not all worth just locking away and forgetting about forever. I mean, why not? If it's originally supposed to be the rehabilitation system or the correctional system, why not give them at least a lifeline or an option to grasp onto if they want to choose that path of redemption?
Oh yeah. I mean also too, think about how many people end up in prisons for, drug charges in some form or faction, that they're not violent,
Or even suspended licenses. Like, I mean, there's a lot of silly reasons people end up in jail.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
not for life sentences, but but they can still end up in the system.
Oh yeah.
So,
if you have a life sentence, we're probably not talking about necessarily anything
non-violent, yeah.
Yeah. So
Armis says, I have worked in arguably the worst prisons in Colorado, Sterling, and I've worked in the women's prison too in Colorado. If they're willing to have CrossFit, they should be willing to teach self-defense. I can't disagree with that. I think it just comes down to identifying what programs to put in place and who should qualify for that and who can it benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's up to the basically the prison system to make sure they can run it safely and have control of the situation safely.
Yeah.
So but I mean, when it comes to me, it helps. It helps everyone. It can help anyone. So,
Yep.
like you said, we've done the episode where we actually talked about how martial arts help people who actually are, kids who actually have cancer. And some of these kids are terminal, and it helps them. So, I mean, it's hard to say if that helps them, if that can help them in that worst time, then how can it not help other people who are going through such other tough times?
Exactly. Like you said, martial arts, the core root of martial arts, the whole purpose is to improve yourself. Now, whether it be for fighting or self-defense or health, so many people have done it for health. If you take the martial arts, obviously your goal is going to be to improve something about yourself. So I think it could definitely be adapted to this environment. And I want to mention that Corey is asking, has anyone heard of the prison martial arts system 52 blocks? I'm not too familiar with it. I think it was developed in California prisons. I could be wrong. Corey, this is an excellent question, and I've been looking into this. This is something I would like to do for a future episode. But yeah, there is a system called 52 blocks. The origin is disputed, but it is said to be a self-defense martial arts system that was formed and taught in prisons. And there's a lot of clips out there. You look, it's very distinct looking. We might actually show some clips next time, but that is a topic that's a whole different topic in itself, because there's people we can interview for that, and there's a lot more experience with that. But yes, there is a system called 52 blocks. From what I understand, the origin is a little bit disputed or a little bit hazy, but that is something we will be coming back to, because I'm actually pretty intrigued with that myself.
Yeah, I mean, being here on the East Coast, I haven't, besides just reading about it, I haven't come across with anyone who has actually have done it or trained with it. So no, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, in person, no. But if you go to YouTube and you search for 52 blocks, you'll find a ton of instructional videos, and you'll see actually a lot of. There are fight clips that use it, and I know the one thing they tend to use is that, like the Muay Thai block, they do the kind of, they bring the elbow up to block. It's close range. Nasty. It's basically a close range street fighting system, but the details of it and the structure of it, I'm not familiar with myself, but I definitely think that's worth looking into.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if you guys are curious, I do invite you to go back to the poll. I think we had a lot of good topics here. Great points were brought up. Great discussion. If you have any more comments, of course, please post them down in the comments down below if you're finding this video later or even after this video. Coming up next, we would actually like to take a look at a real video taken of martial arts being used in the real self-defense situation. which I think is something we should look at more often, because there's always debates about, oh, this really wouldn't work in a fight and that wouldn't work in a fight. Okay, well, why don't we take a look at some of them and see if that holds true. So we're coming next. We're going to take a look at our Fighting Wild section. We're having a little bit of hiccups there. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a internet stuttering there, but so this is a clip that actually has been circulating past 2 years maybe. I've seen it a few times. It's very popular, and I thought it would be a good one to look at. So first, we're just going to go ahead and play the clip, and then we will do some commentary on it. But from what I understand is this was filmed from someone's apartment window, and the guy on the left apparently was starting to fight with the guy on the right, and it came to blows. So let's see how it played out. So there's really the only audio that goes along with this is a commentary, people on the inside of the house laughing and joking, but and of course, here's the cherry on the top right here. You think the fight's over, but nope. Boom. Final shot. Okay. There's a lot to comment on this one. The first thing I noticed, though, is at the beginning, the fighting stances. There's a big difference in the fighting stances. The guy on the left almost seems to be mocking the guy on the right. But the guy on the right, you can kind of see he's in his, his neutral stance, 50-50 weight distribution. His center line is turned away. His hands are up. He's obviously ready. The guy on the left appears to be mocking him. Anybody now, as far as to what art this is, there has been a lot of debate and commentary online, whether it's karate or taekwondo. What do you think? I mean, what are your first things that you've noticed in this?
I mean, for the very first opening, it's hard to tell. It's when after they start moving, can you start to get an idea of what he's doing? Yeah, and you even brought this up before. His kicks are really nice, so I'm leaning towards more taekwondo, more than most karate base. I mean, that's now, but the thing is, what gets interesting for me is the standard, fights when you first start in, the man, of course, wearing the black that has the martial art experience. You can tell in the beginning, his adrenaline's running, he's nervous, he's I don't care how many times you have you fight. When you first fight, your adrenaline kicks in, you're nervous, and everyone starts to you go up. Usually that's kind of one of the common things that people do. They fight, their center of gravity is too high, and you can tell it. They start fighting up, and you start kind of almost reaching over them. But it's when after he hits that kick, that first good solid kick he kicks, you can see him where he's like he's calming. He changes his stance. He changes so he's a little nervous.
Right.
He's panicking. Kicking, boom. Yeah. Then he settles down, and it bang. Getting that right. It's kind of.
And you can see that guy realize he was in over his head.
Yeah.
After just a couple of kicks. What I noticed with the kicks, now as far as it being karate or taekwondo, I'm leaning towards taekwondo as well. There's a lot of hand usage, which you don't see in a lot of competitive taekwondo, but there are the self-defense versions that will use it. What I noticed in particular is how well he gauges his distance.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about, he seems very nervous at the beginning. This might, even people have implied this might be his first fight, because you could see that nervousness, whether it is or not, I guess it's irrelevant. But you're right. Once that first kick connects, he's actually made pretty. He used his punches to get the guy back within kicking range.
Yeah.
And right there was a good kick. And in the spin kick, same thing. He sets up, he switches stances, and he's gauging, and he's almost right on the spot with it. I mean, it looks like he clipped the guy's hands, but it knocked him back. It disarmed him a little bit. It gave him the upper hand in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, the spin kick is not a, especially using it in a street fight. That's just not a thing you throw out randomly.
No,
not
usually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that can go bad, but
oh yeah, it goes bad quick.
but you can see though that he's practiced that particular kick. And right here, I mean, you want to talk about gauging distance. The guy's like giving up, like he's in over his head, and he's gonna come in for a shot, and he stops. But I like how he actually takes a step back, he repositions, and it just fires that. I don't know if it's a liver shot or a rib shot, but that's a fight ender right there.
Yeah.
But he stopped, like you said, he stopped, he settled, he focused, and he delivered that shot. I like this clip a lot just because you don't see this all that often.
No. A lot of times, but even like people, who train martial arts, a lot of times, and even, it doesn't matter what art you get into, that usually you end up your first fight, you use too much hands.
Yeah.
You just fall into it, and when you're nervous, you kind of have that just flailing, sense to you at first,
Yeah.
and that's I think is what happened at first.
Yeah, I think so too. And Michael brings up a really good point. He says, I would say it's his first fight for several reasons. One, the calm right after he has the realization that he can do this. So that's what you touched on. So once he makes that first connection, he starts to settle in. But he goes to spinning kick. His reaction was this, as if he'd only hit pads. He's not ready for the sudden stop that comes with hitting the body. So yeah, like it doesn't follow through. So when you're hitting pads in the air, there's a very different reaction to when you're hitting a solid body. I mean, how heavy is a pad, especially if it's a hand mitt versus someone who's 180 pounds, 170 pounds. There's a really big difference in the hit. And you're right. Like that first kick, it's solid, but it is kind of abrupt how it stops. Like it doesn't follow through. It's like he hits and lands, and he almost stumbles a little bit, but he resets for the spin kick, which also doesn't really connect quite well, but it did its job.
Yeah, it's a spin. But if you play back the spin kick, also notice the height he got on that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, for someone his age, kicking that high in a street fight with a spin kick.
I mean, if he didn't bring his hands up, he would have nailed him right in the face.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that is a beautifully executed kick, and it was probably unexpected. And that's when you see the guy questioning his life decisions.
Yeah.
And then here comes the regret right there. Now, now what's interesting though is taking this into account about whether it's his first, whether it's risky not to throw a kick in a real fight, or whether he can gauge his distance, or he's expecting to follow through. There is a second part to this video that a lot of people don't come across. Like this one has been floating around all over the internet. If you Google it or if you YouTube it, people have actually put Street Fighter sound effects and music and even life bars at the top. It's actually pretty funny. I didn't want to show that one, but this is the raw video, but it's actually pretty funny. That has cycled around, but there is a second part. The guy who took the beating went and got a stick and came back, and I guess another neighbor got the fight from another angle, so it continues. It's not as impressive as the first, but it still shows some more topics to talk about. So he came back with a really big stick.
Well, actually, no. I mean, I think this part of the fight is actually the more interesting part of the fight than the first when it comes to breaking down. Because it's one thing to face someone in the street hand to hand, but it's another thing. Yeah, when someone has a weapon to keep your calm, to keep breathing, but and he actually ended up disarming him in the end there.
Yeah. Now,
and also that his move there, I mean, I haven't watched it as much, but if you back up the kick where he falls, but I mean that's the one thing that actually shows the problem, with actually doing street, fighting, and actually doing kicks is, if they mess up, they can really hurt you bad.
Yeah, well, it looks like his back foot slipped out from underneath him when he threw the kick. Too much momentum, but yeah, that's a bad position.
Yeah,
look at that position
I can't
right
tell,
there.
Did he play that over again?
It looks like he slips. Like he throw.
Yeah,
and I've happened. This has happened to me in sparring. You throw your front leg kick, and your back foot slips on the ground and just goes with your momentum, and you just kind of end up sliding.
But I want to know. See, is
right
the guy
there.
right? Okay, yeah. But I was curious though. It almost looked like for a second he actually got hooked. No, okay. I wasn't sure if he actually got his foot kind of hooked on the guy and threw him off balance.
It's possible, but I think it's a slip. Now,
yeah,
I know every art's a little bit different. And Tracy brings up, and now the guy with no shirt, he's enraged too. Now he just got a beating. Now he's mad, so he's mad with a weapon, and now he's coming back. He's got something to prove at this point. what I want to point out is now with Kempo, and I'm sure every art's a little bit different with this, but we've got, when it comes to weapon defense, our general principles are you want to kind of divert, seize, and control the weapon. That's the priority. You want to get the weapon off its path of attack towards you. You want to seize it, get control, and then get control of it so they can't use it against you. And then once you've secured it, before you can disarm it, you want to do some sort of a distracting move, whether it be a knee kick or something to get the weapon away from them. He starts off doing that. You notice his very first inclination is he goes for right here. He does like a block against the arms.
Yeah.
But then he goes into a flurry of punches before doing that kick. So I don't know if it was just adrenaline or if his training taught him something different, because he goes right in. It almost looks like Five Swords a little bit in Kempo, kind of at the first glance. But what you mentioned about the risk with doing kicks in the street is when he slips, that position right there, what if that was a baseball bat? What if it was a metal pole or an axe or a sharper weapon? I mean, that is a very, very dangerous position to be in.
Yes. Well, and also too is you can tell he threw the kick. That if you watch it, you can tell him that he's throwing the front kick when the guy in the shirt is actually backing away from him. And I think that's one of the reasons that caused him to he's throwing his all into the kick. He's trying to hurt him, and he didn't connect. So
yeah, his distancing was good at first until, like you said, until the guy moves back.
See, he steps back,
and where he does hit, it's like on the hip. That's not really like a vital area either. You can easily take that and keep on fighting.
Yeah.
Before that liver shot, that'll end a fight or even the face, but that's not that in this particular instance. The kick worked against him and for him, and then it just goes into a fray and it just starts ringing. But then he wrestles it away from him. So being a stick is one thing, but had that been a machete, which you don't really see on the street that often, but if it was a bladed weapon or a heavier weapon, he could have had arms broken.
Yes. Well, rule one: if someone comes at you with a bladed weapon, go the other way if you can. Don't unless exactly. you're cornered. Don't with all that open space. Yeah, stay out. You want to stay out of that range because that's just.
Yeah. Dan Strickland says, I'm not Kempo trained, but where's the storm techniques? That's actually a good question. That's actually kind of the storm technique. Storm is the code word for stick in Kempo, so that means defense against the stick. And that's what I'm saying here. He actually looks like he starts one. Like, he come in here, that right there, or if I can get the freeze frame of it. The way he comes in with that block is almost the beginning of it, but then he kind of switches gears and goes into striking without securing the weapon. So he does begin the motions of it. Like I said, I don't know what art he's training in, but he begins the motions, but he switches gears, and I think he should have stayed closer range in this point, controlled the weapon, getting away from the guy, and not risk the kick.
Well, but see, I think that's the other reason why I think he lends more into a kicking art such as Taekwondo, is that he's comfortable with the kicks. He's comfortable with that spacing. He's comfortable with, when he gets up close and in his face, he's uncomfortable about that. He's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, that's scary.
Yeah, it's scary, but it's just not what he's comfortable with. So he's trying to, the guy's going away. I'm going to kick him again. I'm going to end the fight instead of pressuring for, because his options are to step in and close the distance when the guy with the shirt is off. Close the distance, keep up with the hand, try and control. Try to maybe control the stick there. But instead, he's letting him take a step back so he can do a kick.
Yeah, he let him gain the distance. Yeah. Correction. I'm sorry, Dan Strickland. Dan Strickland is Kempo trained. He's saying the guy in the video is not.
Yeah. But it like I said, it is hard to judge someone if this is their first fight.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard to judge because so much of your training goes out the window.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting too. My observation too is that the guy on the left, he actually seems untrained. Period. Like he seems to be mimicking moves, and like he throws a kick, but it's like it has like no principles to it. It's very like almost like a distraction, and he's leaning into his swings are wild. He's leaning into it. He doesn't have the balance. So I'm suspecting the guy's not even trained at all. Versus the guy in the black is trained, and that right there might be the difference in the advantage.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to.
I mean, he doesn't even really throw that. I mean, other than the first flare at the beginning, he doesn't really throw any strikes. Once the guy starts defending himself, like he does the one assault right here, but the rest of it, he goes on to defense.
Yeah.
until
And
he comes
also
back later.
too, the thing, I'm kind of curious to know what the story is, because he taps. I mean, so
Yeah, he's like tapping out.
He's like tapping out here. I'm done. And then he goes and gets a stick and comes back at him.
Yeah.
Which goes to show it doesn't matter if your opponent taps out or not. If you can, leave the area. You never know.
Get out of there.
Yeah, you never know if his friends came, or also too, if this guy's drinking, then
that's true.
So if he's, he may not be a good fighter, but it also your blows don't hurt nearly as much when you start punching someone that's been having a few drinks. They'll keep coming at you longer than they should.
Exactly. Both Tracy and Michael are saying that. She's saying, why is that a shirtless guy in denim jeans and auto-assume alcohol has been part of his day? No, it's not an assumption, but it is. His movements could be, because there are people who are trained when they get drunk, they do lose that coordination. But Michael says, I don't know, but watching this video, I can smell the alcohol, so you're not alone. So yeah.
Well, let's face it, a lot of fights start with most fights
it could
start with drinking. So
yeah,
rarely ever you have a fight going, we went out and we were having a lovely conversation, and then.
Yeah, well, the truth of the matter is we don't know the context. We don't know what started it. We don't know what's being said. I mean, they could be exchanging dialogue here. I can't really see the mouths too well. And we also don't know what kind of time frame is between the two clips. Like, did the guy come back 5 seconds later, or was it 5 minutes later? Like, we don't know a lot of the context. All we have to go on is just watching the technique of what's playing out. And that's a beautiful technique. I mean, you can feel that just watching it.
Yeah, that's the one.
So.
But yeah, play this out all the way through. I haven't watched it that much.
Well, he traded the stick for his jacket.
Yeah, I mean, in my book, that's a fair trade. I'll take the stick and lose my jacket.
And once he has the stick, see, and it stops here too, so we don't even know how it ends. But just judging by what we see here, once again, the guy's rethinking his decisions. Now that the guy in black has the stick.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of.
I mean, that's kind of like time to call it, dude. Like, go about your day at that point.
Now, that's the actual interesting thing is actually having people. Rarely do you train in martial. Mostly you train in martial art, and most people train, I should say, in martial arts, training kind of in a sterile environment. You're training on a mat, you're training on level ground, you're training in a gear or some sort of workout clothes. Rarely you're training on an uneven surface where there's rocks, loose debris, and also too is where your actual clothes are actually used as a weapon against you, such as pulling the jacket over your face.
Yeah. And where they're fighting too, there's another element that really could have changed the dynamics of this fight too. Is what if there was a lot of traffic?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're in the middle of the street right now. I mean, that's another hazard too. So yeah, this is absolutely not a training environment. So everything is going to be different.
Right. Exactly.
So,
but it would be interesting to see how it went a little bit longer, because I'm kind of curious to see if this guy has actually any weapon skills, and that would be actually tell a lot. Yeah. Because right now it doesn't look like the way he's holding it. It's hard to judge for 2 seconds, but it doesn't look like he has any weapon training whatsoever.
No, it's all wild swinging. But
no,
if anyone,
the man in the black,
Oh, once he gets it.
Yeah, once he gets it, it would be interesting to actually see if he had any. Took what stance he would actually have done with when he holds it.
Yeah,
but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because he gets it, points to him, and then it cuts.
Yeah, so it cuts too early. So I don't know if there's any more existing video of this. If anyone knows of it, please, we'd love to see it. Share it. If there's any context that we don't know, I have a feeling this is all we get. But if anyone out there has any more information on this, we're definitely interested in taking a look at it. But yeah, so I thought that was a good example of taking a look at martial arts in an actual street fight.
Yeah.
So, and we're going to now go on to our final section. Is we're going to go to our mailbox and answer some viewer questions. So this is the part of the show. We get questions all the time. We get questions from our Patreon and YouTube membership viewers. People post questions down in the comments of videos. We try to read as many of them as possible, and when we can, we pull some out, and because there's a lot of good talking points that people bring up. So if you do have any questions, you can definitely join us on Patreon or YouTube memberships. We're more likely to see them there because there's a more of an intimate, closer communication. But if you have any questions, you can post them on any video, on any post, on down below in the chat, whatever you want, and we will try to get to as many as we can. But going off to the first question right here, the first question comes from the Grounded Aviator. Is a joke now and then or a little lightheartedness allowed when appropriate? Now, I'm assuming they mean in a classroom setting, is it joking around in the classroom setting appropriate? And I think it really depends on, well, who's doing the joke. Is it the instructor or is it the student? But when you did your Wing Chun classes, what was the formality like when you guys were on the mat?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a adult class only, and when we did it, it was a lot of humor, a lot of joking, a lot of when the instructor is talking, he would be very humorous and joke and fighting, but it was a very rowdy bunch of guys actually fighting. So it would be one of those things where you would kick each other trying to see if you can make each other fart louder. So kind of one of those things, or hitting each other. Whoever, if you got your other opponent to throw up, you're the winner. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of joking. So, but if you're a kid going through, if you're a more traditional school where there's 50 other kids and stuff, that's where I believe that you should be a lot more serious. Maybe joke if you're separated to just spar off and one-on-one to just lighten the mood, so not so tense, especially if you're doing one-on-one and you're trying to teach someone a technique and they're getting frustrated. I think that's when a little humor to the situation to relieve them of their frustration will actually help. And I find that actually is where the good thing of joking in front of the whole class to distract them. I don't like that, unless, because humor it's so hard to follow. I would only do it. I would basically, my thing with joking is more one-on-one. You're trying to teach someone a technique and they're getting frustrated, or even sometimes even when you're getting frustrated. That's a big thing. If you're starting to get frustrated with the technique and you just can't get it and you start building up, sometimes, stop, do a joke to make them laugh, you laugh, gets that extra second in of calming down, because you don't want to get frustrated out of somebody who's trying to teach you and help you. That's the worst, because you're mad at yourself.
No, that's actually a great point. So adding levity into a stressful situation can be beneficial. I think it really depends on the school, because you've got some traditional schools, especially if they've got a Japanese or Okinawan background, where it's serious. Like, you don't crack a joke; it's considered disrespectful. There's a lot of schools where you don't even ask questions. So if you're in that type of environment, I wouldn't start using humor out of turn. But it can go the other way too. In my personal experience, my first instructor, our classes, it was a bunch of teenagers. Things were kept kind of on a lighter tone. It was a serious class. We couldn't goof around, but our instructor would crack a joke every once in a while. Or if we got, like you said, you try to throw a little bit of humor in, whether you want to raise levity or add some levity, that works too. But it can go to the other extreme, because I had another instructor who spent a lot of time starting off with humor, and it started to get inappropriate. And the next thing we know, half the class became a stand-up for criticizing, and the humor started being directed at other practitioners. It was kind of getting uncomfortable. So there's definitely a line to cross. I don't think it should be allowed to the point where it becomes detracting from the class or the lesson at hand.
No, and that's true too, because sometimes you go to class, and there's some people that go to class and they're just doing to get out, especially adult classes. There's some guys that they're getting out just to get away from their their families for a moment, or even girls, imagine too, just to get out and get away from their husbands or their families or whoever it is, and just they're using it as a social happy hour, not really that serious about it. There's a lot of people like that, and then it can drop the whole class participation down drastically. Like I said, so if you use humor in the right way, I think it's beneficial. Like, actually, there was another incident I was thinking about. I had another guy who take Wing Chun with me. Actually, you know him very well. His actual name is Dan too. But we would do basically a technique, and one of those things where if we drop our hand, drop our gate, you're supposed to go and get punched. Well, instead of punching him, actually he was doing it to me. Instead of punching me, he would give me a nipple twist. He would grab my nipples and twist it. And it's funny, it laughs, but let me tell you, you do it, 3 or 4 times, you don't drop your hand.
No,
Because
those hands stay up.
it's not just funny, it's also one of those things where, you laugh, but you're like, okay, no. It's one thing to get popped 6 times. It's another thing to get in front of everyone laughing as your nipples getting twisted. So,
Yeah.
so humor
Well,
can be used as a great lesson to remember things if you do it
oh
right.
yeah.
A great joke, great, you know. So if you're trying to teach someone, oh, keep your hands up, if you just get slapped in the face 10 times, they might not remember as much as you know, if you poke them, pretend to poke them in the eye, don't really poke people in the eyes, but, give them the Three Stooges, poke them in the eye, hit them with that. It's one of those things where it just ingrains it in a different part of their brain that helps them to be like, oh yeah, all right, when I keep my hands up, keep my hands low. When you're doing this drill, move from here to here, watch this side. So humor is very useful in that aspect.
Agreed. And Michael's agreeing with you too. He goes, I like to know why students are taking the art because you have, as Zach is saying, that some people are not there for self-defense so much, but discipline or just for the friends in the workout. Knowing that allows you to know when to push them to progress. So yeah, so knowing why they're there is a good indicator of where that line is drawn.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah,
And
yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, it's hard because everyone's there for different reasons.
Exactly. And I like we didn't do the nipple twisting class, but when I was teaching the kids are so forgetful. I mean, you talk about young kids, 5, 6, 7, 8, they're learning coordination still. So for them to always have this notion of keeping their hands up, it has to be repeated, repeated, repeated. And the one thing I would just do is walk around the class, like if we're doing drills or doing punches in the air. They're short, I'm tall. If one of the kids dropped their hands, my hand was at the level. I just grabbed their face and took a step with them and made them take a step back, and they were like, it throws them for a second. I'm like, the hand should have been up, and I just bring it up and I just grab it. I'm like, if I can grab your face, can imagine what your opponent's going to be able to do.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's you just take them one step out of their comfort zone. And they kind of like get shaken up by it, but yeah, it's a conditioning aspect.
Yeah, I mean, you've taught kids way more than I have ever have taught kids. So I mean, let me ask you the question. Did you find humor as a good tool to teach kids for
In certain
martial arts?
Yes, in certain situations, yes, because there's times too when you're doing an instruction, and that's one thing you got to balance out because there's drills you could teach, and I'll sit them down and talk to them. But if you're going to sit them down and talk to them for about a minute or two, that's fine. If it's going to be 10 minutes, you're going to lose their attention. So sometimes humor can break it up, or if there's a kid that's struggling in class, one of the things I would like to do is if he was kind of struggling or who didn't have the full attention, I would actually call them up to the front of the class to demonstrate a technique. So I would hold the pad and I would like or hold my hand up and I let them do a punch. I'm like, well, okay, that's pretty good, but like let's put a little bit more rotation into it, whatever. And then they would hit me a second time, and I would pretend like they just like slam my hand with a hammer. I'd be like, oh my god, ow, wow, just like woo, Superman, watch it there, and a smile will crack on their face. So if you can kind of get them to break, whether they're not paying attention or they're nervous or their mind's somewhere else, sometimes a little thing like that can kind of snap them out of it, or it makes them feel good too, because then now you've just shown them in front of the class. Oh no, I just hurt Mr. Dan. Ooh, I'm good. So sometimes I found effectiveness in that, but there's also a drawback too when you've got a class full of 20 kids and a joke cracks, especially if a kid cracks a joke and they all start laughing. You got to get that under control quick, or the whole class is going to unravel. So yeah, it's finding the time and place for it. But I did find humor can be, especially with children, humor can be a good tool when it reinforces something or as a confidence booster, or just like you said, add some levity to material that might be a little bit dull for an 8-year-old to listen to for 10 minutes. So I think it's a good little tension breaker.
Yeah, I can see that. Like I said, I'm as being more adult classes. Like I said, I find it more useful, especially when people get frustrated. That would be the only time I would ever, like, say if you're a good example is say if you're having a sparring day and everyone's around and watching someone spar and watching you spar, or better that you're watching someone spar and they're having a tough time at it for whatever reason that day. They're not making and they're getting frustrated and they're getting mad. And at that point in time, I think, if you can get a good, funny joke in where you can get everyone to laugh, you can't, not as anyone expenses. That's the other thing,
Yeah.
especially if you can do it where it's you kind of direct attention, get them to calm down for 10 seconds, because sometimes in sparring, it gets a little too heated, and and the person's getting frustrated and getting mad, not necessarily, it's just whatever reason he can't get a combination in, and he keeps getting popped on this combination, and he keeps trying it because they want to learn it, and next thing you know, they're going to end up actually fighting because over something stupid, or whatever. And if you can sometimes tell a good joke, get everyone to laugh and everyone to calm down, to okay, all right, de-escalate the situation. I think that's where humor is really good as a teaching tool in martial arts, is to remember everyone in the dojo is on the same page. You're all trying to learn. You're all different levels, and you're all trying to get together versus start. I mean, because let's face it, you get, we're training sometimes to get, training ourselves to get popped 50 times in the face and get popped in the stomach and hit. Your tension goes up. You get mad.
Oh yeah.
So, and you get mad for, and you sometimes you have to have your anger gets, you put it on somebody else, and you need to take a step back from it, and instead of doing something stupid where, that's it. This time I'm going to kick him in the balls.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, sparring. When Mr. Alex, Sensei Alex, good friend of this channel, he will hold sparring days, and we will go and spar there. And the one main rule is it's all egos outside the door. We're there to have fun. We're there to kind of just practice, work out with each other. So there's a lot of humor flying. There's some fun trash talking, but it's always got that levity. It's never gotten to the point where, like you said, you start fighting, you start getting tense, where people actually start to really fight. There's always a sense of, we're here, we're having fun. Okay, yeah, you got me in the face. I'm going to crack a joke about how good your foot pad tasted. It's always stuff like that. So it definitely can be a good bar to set for controlling whatever level of intensity you want for the classroom.
Yeah, but the number one thing I think you got to also watch out with the humor is not to be where it's you're basically attacking someone with the humor, or degrading someone's self-esteem or point of view with the humor. It's very easy to do that, Yeah. It's very easy to, like, if someone accidentally slips and falls on their butt and looks like a moron because he's trying to do a kick, just because maybe the last video, you got to be careful about making too much fun of that and too many times, because you also don't want to. It's not, the fact is, like, okay, hey, martial art, you're supposed to learn, be tough and everything like that. But also too is they're there for a reason. They're not there to get, they're not there to get emotionally beat up. They're there to get, learn how to defend themselves and get physically beat up, not emotionally, I should say. And that gets complicated.
Agreed. And Michael actually touches on what I was talking about with the work with the kids. He said sometimes humor helps break the ice or something, but the humor can then be a trigger that sends them down a goofy road, and that is hard to pull them back from. Because that one kid can turn into several or just be a distraction. So yeah, there's definitely that domino effect there to be cautious about. So I liked using it. Like I said, when I brought the kid up, I liked using it in that instance, but you do have to be careful when it's in the classroom setting, because it absolutely is a cascading effect. And once you lose that control, you're going to lose 10 minutes of your class just trying to get it back.
Yeah. See, yeah, like I said, you have far more experience doing, teaching kids than I do, Yeah. I, at most, one or two kids for a short period of time. I don't know how you do like 50 kids in a room.
Well, it's not unlike the prison question. Is you have to identify who can handle what, who's appropriate for what you can teach to who, because they can
find
be
the
ruthless.
biggest kid and take the biggest kid down in the first minute.
You joke. That's not a lie. All right, so let's go on to the second question. The second question comes from Nishad Jagannath. My son is 8 years old and is autistic. He is a very slow learner, has trouble focusing and communicating with others. Do you think that the martial arts can help him? I absolutely think that martial arts can help him. Now, I'm not speaking from someone that has experience with someone on the spectrum, but a lot of the students that came through the school were on the spectrum, and of varying degrees. You had very high functioning students, and we had a few that were not very well functioning at all. And there's a great degree of challenges among them, but I definitely saw a difference in most of them. We I know we had a handful of kids that we'll come back to in a second, but we had a handful of kids that maybe martial arts wasn't the best thing for them in their lives at this point in time, and they had to maybe seek out other help. But I mean, what's your opinion on that? Do you believe that martial arts can help someone on the
Well,
spectrum?
well, I have both of my girls are on the spectrum at some point. My oldest is very high functioning on this, but I absolutely totally agree with it. Now, I've tried to got my girls interested into martial arts many times, and both of them are not interested in martial arts. They're interested into lies and different things. But the real trick from going through and dealing with all the different therapies and all the and different ways to handle it is it depends on how your kid is and how your kid's on the spectrum. I think martial arts can help them, but one, you cannot force your kid to take martial arts. They have to have an interest in it, especially if they're on the spectrum, because the worst thing to do is force if you force someone into something that they're not ready for, even though you know it will benefit them, it can have the when they're on the spectrum, it can really have a more dramatic effect. It's much more, the little setbacks can be dramatic. For us, oh, someone, you did something wrong, people laughed, it's not a big deal. It upsets you for I think, but the end of class, it's over. For them, it can haunt them for months and even days. Or sometimes they even bring things up that years later. So you have to be careful. So you have to make sure that they have an interest in it. Also, too, is there's in our area, which we're lucky, there's a lot of people that actually will have just special classes that will be just for autistic kids that are martial arts or dancing or singing, that are just them. And what's great about that, especially if your kid's a little bit lower on the spectrum, as they kind of say, or not as high functioning, that way they're surrounded by their peers. Now, the thing, though, is also what's beneficial to that is if you have, let's say, if your kid's more on the higher spectrum and you go to more high functioning, sorry, and you go to the place that where it caters to it, it's actually good for them to see that there's other people out there that are struggling with issues that they can understand. And also, too, is you're now inspiration for the other kids, that they can say, hey, this kid is doing something, and he overcompensated or she overcompensated through their through their problems. And it's actually it's a big help, because it doesn't matter what you say. Sometimes it's what they see, and
Mm-hmm.
and they'll make connections, and you'll say something 50 million times into you're blue in the face, and they'll just see one other kid do the thing, and they'd be like, oh, that's it, I get it, that's okay, all right, that's what you're supposed to do. And that's a huge thing. But the thing that actually I think that I mean, like my oldest, which I'm dying to, she a lot of times on the spectrum, they have lack spatial awareness. Like, she walks into doors, she walks into walls, she and having martial art to actually start to teach them to learn where they are in space, and learn their body, and where, because they actually even say that it's a sense to actually know where your hands, your feet are in space, and actually have them actually learn that is a huge help. So, like, one of the things we actually did with our girls was actually set up little obstacle courses in our house, and we would have them run through the obstacle course to teach them. And I had tried to teach them martial arts, and they learned it for a little while, but it's just not their interest. And actually, it's interesting because my youngest, she has a huge aggressive side to her. So when she gets confused, like I said, in the best way to describe it, it's kind of like she suffers, for no apparent reason from post-traumatic stress disorder. Like all of a sudden it just clicks off and she's just at the high end. But to have her a couple times to teach her martial arts, she actually feels safer with it. She actually feels in connection and more control. She doesn't feel as danger all the time. So the benefits, like I said, it helps everybody. It's highly suggested. I don't care if you're in a wheelchair or if you're 6 years old or 60 years old, one-legged, blind, in a wheelchair. I think it has benefits to everybody.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on some comments here. Michael saying, he goes, I think it also depends on the art as well. There are other arts that are more willing to bend to the practitioner rather than the other way around. We have a lot of kids with various challenges. And Armis23 says, with the right teacher, yes, it could help. And yeah, I have to agree with that because there are some arts where, Kempo at its core is meant to kind of adjust to the practitioner. So if you're an instructor and you've got a kid in the class that is suffering from some sort of challenge or is on the spectrum, you should be able to take the material and modify it based on what they're capable of doing, and then kind of structure out your own plan for that kid and on how you can increase the level to kind of push them past their boundaries, because their boundaries are not going to be the same as everyone else in the class. They're not going to progress the same way. They're not going to take the material the same way. So yeah, I agree with that. You would want an art or a teacher that's willing to modify the material to that particular student's needs.
Yeah.
And then Tracy brought up too, she said, and this is a great segue here, she says, the Kids Kicking Cancer program seems to be good for sick kids. I wonder if it would help with the spectrum disorders. So if you're just coming into the chat now, we are partnered with the Hero Circle Kids Kicking Cancer. It's a fantastic program. They are an organization that teaches all over the world, and what they do is they teach martial arts programs to children who are fighting cancer, sickle cell disease, organ transplants, whatever their ailments are, but they use the martial arts as a way to cope with their pain. They have a very, very, very high success rate with pain management where the kids don't need the medication, and it also helps them process emotional distress. They've seen an 80% decline in emotional distress for not just them, but their families, their siblings as well. So it's a fantastic program. We do have a donation button. We're trying to raise money for them. I've been talking to them for a while. They are an excellent, excellent program. And as far as using the martial arts for something good and helping other people, I can't think of an organization that's better than this. So if you guys want to, there's a donate button on the side, or any super chats will go towards that. But I think Tracy brings up an excellent point, though. If we can use the martial arts to teach kids the mental side of dealing with something as devastating as cancer and emotional distress and the management, why can't that be applied to other conditions as well, whether it be a spectrum or any other disability?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it definitely can help. I mean, just having that basic understanding of even their your body, your senses. I mean, that's just anything along those lines is dramatically can help them. I mean, and of course every kid is different, especially any kid who's fighting through some form of autistic. Everyone's different, and everything. It's kind of almost a blanket term at this point in time. But yeah, I mean, if your kid shows any interest in it, I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, it's very tricky. If you have a kid that's autistic, depending on where they are in the level of it, if you feel more comfortable, there are programs that just cater just for kids on the spectrum, and even if that's a thing where you want to start, hey, let's see if you like it first. Let's see if this is something you could get to, because I can imagine a kid on the spectrum, like taking my oldest to she's very high functioning, taking her to a martial art class a couple times. I took her to her, and seeing all those kids lined up and doing martial arts was over it was too much for her at first. It was too loud, it was too much motion, too many kids, and it kind of was too much, and she's just like, oh, I can't handle it. So even I recommend even doing where you do just one class a week with one-on-one and pay for another kid to come in and teach them. That might even be a great idea if you don't have organizations around that can do it. Just a one-on-one, someone that's, a teenager that come in to teach them, so that way it's a little quieter, and then it can build up their confidence. So when they actually then might be able to actually then go to class and actually fight. So.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I mean, the unfortunate truth is there are some kids who either are not ready for the martial arts or just might not be a good fit. We had two in particular. One child, it was actually interesting. This family had three children in the class, and all three children were on the spectrum, but various degrees. So there was one that was really, really high functioning, one that was mostly high functioning, and the little brother who was not very high functioning, and he needed constant attention. We put him in the class. All three students were in class, and the two sisters were fine. But like, if you took your eye off him for a second, like you always had to remind him, get back in your position, get back in your position. But if you took your eyes off him for 1 second, he'd be running around the room completely distracted. It got to the point where we had to work with him one on one. The awareness wasn't there. Like we were doing weapons one day. We were actually doing no, actually it was bow staffs. We were just doing some bow staff drills, light drills for the kids. And he came in and he saw me and he wanted to say hi. He just walked right through the classroom, right up to me. I had to like kind of part away from him. He was completely oblivious to the weapons flying around the room. He easily could have been hurt. Yeah. And it got to a point where he was just so like his parents decided that he needed another program versus the martial arts. He just wasn't taken to it, and even working with him one on one, you could just see he just wasn't at the area where it wasn't helping him. And after about a year, they had to put him in another program. His two sisters did great. They did great. One of them actually went on to earn her junior black belt, so they did great. And we had another student, wasn't with us very long. He was like 10 or 12, but he was one of those kids who was as big as an adult. Like he had some major growth spurt. He was as big as I am. And his family denied him being on the spectrum, but we don't make any judgments, but we could definitely see his behavior in class. There was something that wasn't quite right. And he had a couple violent outbursts, and they went to a summer camp trip one day, and it was like at an arcade. And I wasn't there for this, but I heard that he had a meltdown to the point where he was throwing stuff around the arcade. He picked up a chair, was throwing it, and he actually struck one of the counselors. So it got like extremely violent. And there were after a couple of incidents with him, he wasn't allowed in the school because he was actually a serious threat to the other students. I mean, he was twice their size, actually 3 times their size, and he was giving us a challenge with his strength. And we had to actually talk to his family and say, look, he needs to be in some sort of therapeutical program because we're giving him stuff that he is now misusing. And he wasn't getting the home support. So unfortunately, I hate to say it, but there are sometimes kids or people in certain phases that might not be adept to taking the martial arts, at least at this point in time, without other support programs in place.
Oh yeah, no, that is definitely true. I mean, my youngest, she could not. I would, even at this time right now, I couldn't send her to martial arts school that wasn't geared for kids on the spectrum straight. If she got frustrated too much, she would become the same thing, as the one kid, screaming, throwing things, trying to run out of it. And, that's hard to put on to anyone who's not trained for it or expecting it. And so, yeah, there's just, and also too, is like I said, it really depends on the kid and where they are and what they need. So like I said, but like you're talking about the one kid walk through. Yeah, that's my oldest, she would walk right through and get smashed in the face and be like, what? And do it right again. And just get like, oh.
Yeah. And it's a challenge. And it's something that we have to be aware of too. Because, I mean, if they're not aware of it, that falls on us, either as parents or as instructors, to make sure that they're aware of it until at some point in time they can develop that awareness. But it's tricky. It's definitely not an easy answer.
Oh, yeah, no. But if you get someone that knows how to deal with it, or even one-on-one, I think is a huge, or even like I said, smaller, because that's the main thing. Is a lot of times it's overwhelming for kids on the spectrum to come in and have a full class, and it's all the kids that are saying. So if you can kind of have it where it's a smaller class, it's quieter, it's not so loud or echoey, because sometimes you go in, and like I said, it's too much for them, having even 20 kids is it's too much for them to see all those kids moving and all those things going on. It's just, so if you can have it where it's, just a couple kids, 3 or 4 kids, it's a huge, that might be what they need.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, definitely. And more places are now understanding the needs of kids on the spectrum and stuff. So like there's different kids play gyms or kids activity. They'll have sensory nights where they actually don't play the loud music and they turn off the lights, all the blinky lights basically, of the arcades and games and stuff like that. So that way it's a lot quieter and it's not overwhelming and stimulating for them. So there's definitely organizations out there. I think someone mentioned about the Y. I think it's quite read the full thing, but yeah, I mean, there's more and more people who are actually identifying it, that they actually have kids that are on the spectrum, so they kind of understand and know what to expect. But yeah, unfortunately too is yeah, some of the kids on the spectrum, that it's a sensory issue. So things, they can get kind of violent sometimes. They can get bitey because you know we don't see it as a threat, but something happens and it goes off in their brain that goes, I'm in danger, this is a crisis, and I'm about to, I fight or flight kicks right in. So it definitely can be a concern.
Mm-hmm. The Y comment was Corey Ballinger said, about a decade ago I was teaching kids karate at our local YMCA.
Oh
I had
wow.
several kids that were on the spectrum. It was a challenge at first, but I seen them grow and they gained rank and they were awesome karateka. And that's, I mean, I have to say too, I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than having a student who's facing the challenge and you work with them and seeing them progress over time. There's no prouder moment than that, because you're actually saying, look, I mean, this is something that's actually helping them, and these are skills this child is going to develop and grow up with and carry on with them for the rest of their life. And we had one kid. I can't take credit for this because he was here before I started teaching, but I was told he was so bad when he started. All he would do is he would lock himself in the closet and cry the entire time. He wouldn't even come out for class. By the time I started working for the school, he was taking class, finishing classes. He was very, very, very shy. But over the years, he got more and more outgoing. He became a lot more friendly. He started being humorous with us, telling jokes after class. He definitely warmed up, and to the point where he was highly functioning. He got his driver's license. He went to college, and he became an actual good, a very functional adult. And I hope the martial arts played that role for him. I mean, it could something he could have grown into, but like I said, his journey started before I got there. But even from what I saw, was he went from here all the way up to here. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, just to answer the question in general, I think absolutely the martial arts is a fantastic way, or could be a fantastic solution for anyone on the spectrum to hopefully get some footing or some developmental skills or whatever they might need to kind of help break their barriers.
Oh yeah. I mean, to me, there's no doubt in my mind. If your kid, is on the spectrum but shows any inkling into martial arts, I would highly invest into it, and spend the time and spend the energy to get them into it, because it only is going to help them directly. It just, even if they get that one thing that they like, and that's the thing that keeps them going. And martial art is, I think, excellent for them in that sense. But anything to break them out, to break them out of the shell, anything to get them so that they want to actually, get up and because they live, some of the people on the spectrum, kids that live on the they're on the spectrum, they're just in a world of uncertainty. The world's not quite set up for them, and it's very odd. So it takes a lot for them to face it every day, and to get them anything to keep them going and keep them to put themselves out, is, I think, is a huge benefit. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, but if your kid's on the spectrum, don't just throw them in a martial art class. I just don't do that. Just, unless they're ready for it. If they're not ready for it, you know, try it out smaller, and
And talk
definitely, yeah,
meet with the instructor too. Tell them what the
yes,
challenges are so they know what they're going in with and they can prepare themselves too.
yeah, that actually is a huge recommendation. Yeah, you can't be shy about it. You can't be like, oh, I don't want to tell anyone my kid is on the spectrum. You have to be, straight up for it. My kid's on the spectrum. Most people are willing to help you and help your kid out, but they need to know it's when it's out of right, out of the norm, that they're not used to it, that it becomes a huge problem. But if they're expecting it and you tell them, sit down and tell them, they might get upset over this. They might cry over this. They might need, my oldest, she get like, she gets it where if things bother her, but you can't confront her on it, just give her space. She'll go off in the corner. She'll be there. She might even cry a little bit for like 5 minutes to herself, and then she gets right back in and goes into it. So, those are the things. If you tell the teacher, be like, if she gets, they get over upset, and just let them go off in the corner, then they understand it. They know what's going on, and they're not going to push them in the wrong way. That's a huge, right. huge thing.
Yeah.
But
so I think it's definitely a big topic. It's one I want to come back and revisit. I think we could definitely do a stream just on that alone. For those who are interested, we did do an episode looking at a study that was done with the martial arts. They did a program where they tested executive function for kids that were on the spectrum before and after doing some martial arts classes, a series of classes, and they did find an elevated performance in executive function. So what we do is after we're done with the stream, I'm going to add that link down below in the description, because if you guys haven't seen that yet, I think it's a great study, and it's definitely one I want to come back to, because I think that could be a whole topic on itself.
Oh yeah, we should definitely do a whole topic on that.
So, and the final question comes from Ghost of Tsushima. Can you do a video, please, about martial arts in social life and showing off? When they say showing off, I'm assuming they mean showing off your martial arts skills in a public space. I'm definitely a little bit torn on that. So I'm not sure where the lines are drawn here. You talk about just being public about your martial arts, or you're talking about doing demonstrations or showing off, but my gut reaction is I generally like to keep my martial arts a little bit private. I mean, if I'm out with friends or talking, or just talking in a casual conversation, that's one thing. But when it comes to like performing it in public, I think there's some cautions to take there. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, well, how it is like when you first start learning something. So, I have a funny feeling that if they're new into the martial arts or new to a certain art, you want to show it off. That's what you're thinking about. That's what you're talking about. Every conversation, you're talking to your loved ones, and you're like, oh, that reminds me. And you got to remember, they may not be into as much as you are, and that gets obnoxious. But also too with the showing off, it depends. If you're trying to use it to because people are showing interest in you, if people are showing interest in the martial art, or you're trying to advertise and market your school or in a positive and reinforcing way, it could be a good thing. But very quickly, it can be one of those things where it's quite, I don't know, the proper word, inappropriate, yeah, and grading, and more or less, you're the guy pumping their chest and backing up, So
you're reminding me of a story you told me years back, that you said when you were young and you and your friends went out to like the clubs, that there was a local karate guy out there, and he was like drunk or high, and he was doing kata out on the dance floor.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was doing kata on the dance floor, and of course, then everyone's just like, "What is this guy doing?" Yeah, he's sitting there. He's doing kata like as a dance. I don't know to this day what he was thinking or what he's doing, but everyone's just kind of like, "Oh God, okay, stay away from this guy. He's not right in the head." So, and I say he was drunk or high or something, but I don't know. But that's the thing. He might have been just having a good time and having fun, but you just you got to do things appropriately. So, and if you're starting new, you're starting off, probably less is more at that point in time.
Yeah, probably. Well, I when I was in high school, there was a kid in my class, in my journalism class, and he had just started taking karate at the local school. And this kid, he had his own share of problems. He didn't have the greatest home life and not the greatest sense of judgment, but he had just started taking class, and we had come from a lunch break, and we came into the classroom where we're sitting down, and he's going up to people saying, "Hey, I just started learning karate. Will you throw a punch at me so I can block it?" And I had to kind of pull him aside. I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing? You're just asking for trouble." And he's like, "Well, I wanted to see if this works." I'm like, "You're in a school classroom. you're going to ask the wrong person, and you're not going to like the answer to that, especially if
Yeah.
you're just starting. But I think in his case, it was a confidence issue. He definitely had a major complex, and like I said, he came from an abusive family. He had a lot of self-esteem issues and confidence issues. So I think he was using that to kind of, I don't want to say posture, but almost kind of gain a little bit of respect. But what it was having the opposite effect on that, and I think it was going to put him in more of a dangerous situation because again, he had just started. He had like a week under his belt, so he wasn't going to like be able to really defend himself if something happened. But I'm like, this is inviting trouble, and I think that's one of the threats too. When you get to the point of showing off, if you're saying, "Oh, I'm a martial artist," and you're showing off, and if you're in the public setting and you start doing it, you don't look as cool as you probably think you do. I mean, if you're trying to show off for people, most people aren't going to be that impressed, and I know some people might do it to show, look how good I am. You don't want to mess with me. But my perspective on that is if you're trying to use it as a deterrent, the type of people that you would want to deter are not going to be deterred. They're going to actually take that as a challenge. So you might actually invite trouble with that.
Yeah. Actually, one of the stories my father used to tell me is, and my father is a pretty big guy. You know, he's 6'2", and he talked about when he used to work back in the day when he was a young kid, and he would work at a grocery store. There was a guy that would tower over him. So my dad's 6'2", so this guy's got to be pretty big. He said he towered over him like another 3 to 5 inches. So he was a big guy. So he said that every night when they would close up, he would ask him, "Could you walk me to my car? Could you, walk me out when I close the store?" And finally, he's like, "You're so big. Why do you want me to walk you out?" And he goes, "Because I'm so big, everyone keeps picking on me because they think I'm the challenge." So he's like, if there's 2 people, they're less like they don't find me threatened, because when I walk out by myself, I'm the big guy. He says all they want to do is start a fight with me to prove this, because the newest people want to prove themselves so they can beat up the biggest guy. So
they have something to prove with it, and so
right.
So the challenge is there. So if you're walking around showing off moves, and that kind of person's around you, they're not going to be impressed.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, yeah, and if you're starting out and you're doing it, you might not have the skills that you need to defend yourself.
Yeah.
So I hate to say it's not Cobra Kai that you learn to watch a window and sweep the floor and jack up a car, that you can defend yourself off of three people at once.
Are you telling me I've been doing chores all my life for nothing?
Well, I don't know. Have you been doing it the right way? Have you been washing the
not very well. Just
yeah. You want me to ask Tracy? She'll probably tell me the truth.
Yeah, she'll be like, "Hey, what?" She'll say, "What chores?" No, but it's funny too, because like we're talking here about like showing off martial arts in public. I don't even like going out anywhere in my uniform. Like even after class, I know people who will go to the grocery store, who'll go out to eat, and they'll just wear the uniforms. I'm like, I can't. No, like to me, I'm like that. One, it doesn't feel appropriate because I don't know. Like you're kind of walking around in pajamas, but it doesn't feel like appropriate dress. But 2 is like I don't want to walk around in my belt and my gi for the same kind of reasons. You're not showing off. It's not really going to impress anybody, and if anything, it might just invite trouble.
Yeah,
so, and that's just me.
Yeah, I can kind of see it one thing because it is really comfortable. It's like wearing pajamas. So
yeah,
I can see it. I can see that in some sense, just because just wear pajamas around all day, all day. Bring a pillow and sleep.
They are mighty comfortable.
But yeah, no, now, if you're trying to do it where, like, if he was talking about, like, doing, like, showing off as in, like, public, like, you were a part of when you're in high school. What was it called?
The demo team.
The demo team, yeah.
Yeah.
So that might be, that's a different thing. That's kind of a marketing thing.
Yeah, but there's also a time and place for that too. It's not like we just went out and just did it. I mean, we actually set up. We were at festivals. We were at like martial arts festivals. Or was at like even certain shopping days, like shopping centers would center off like an area for performances. So it was always like a pre-planned set up thing. It wasn't like we just stood up in the middle of the bar and just started doing kata on each other.
Yeah. Well, and also too is it never looks as good as you think it looks. To the other person. That's the other problem too. It's one of those things when you're you're like, this looks awesome, and and then you watch it back like someone shot foot, you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's. Do you guys? Okay, for those watching, you have no idea how many clips I have filmed for B-roll for our episode. When I played it back, I'm like, I look like that. Nope, delete. So it's like, yeah, it's a perception of what there's what you feel like and what you think you look like, and then what you actually look like. So yeah, showing off in public, it doesn't come across probably as cool as you think it does.
Yeah. Yeah, because also too is martial. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, besides some of the high kicks and stuff like that, most martial arts not as thrilling as you think it is. You know, it's
Yeah. Armis23 says, in a lot of cases, the bigger the talk, the less the fight. That's true. And that comes with posturing. A lot of people who posture are just trying to cause a deterrent. So this could be, showing off martial arts could be a form of somebody's doing that, just trying to, their way of talking big, but they can't always back it up.
True, but also but also too is if you also put it the other way too, if you can prevent or de-escalate a situation by showing off your martial arts skills, yeah, that's always that is definitely something there, if if you do something where I can't think of anything off the top of my head that the people then are no longer like, oh, okay, let's get into a fight. That's a win.
Yeah,
that's a win. That's definitely a win, especially if you can do something where you get them where they're more interested into learning about the martial art than actually fighting. That's definitely a win. So
absolutely. No, the guys that worry me are the ones who are quiet, and you can kind of see them take a stance that's passive. That they'll turn their center line away. You see that their feet are balanced and pointed, and their hands might be like, "Hey man," or they're up, whatever. Like that's a person that, and then they're quiet. That's a person that's might know something, or at the very least, you shouldn't assume they don't. Those concern me more than people who are so boisterous and just showing off. Look what I could do, because I don't know, a little bit about the unknown is like not knowing what that person knows is a little bit scarier than showing off. Because when you're showing off and there's someone there who might actually want to fight you, you're basically showing them your technique. You're kind of giving them some tells.
True. Yeah.
So there's definitely a risk with that.
Yeah. No, that is definitely true. Yeah. That you gotta be careful. But there's always less is more, I always say.
All right, I have to read this comment. Michael says, I took a photo once for Kempo, and I was a white belt throwing a high kick, and I didn't have my cup on, so you can see the full X print of my dangly bits. Yeah, the whole photo package is gone now. Yeah, we all have photos where we play back and like, yeah, whoops.
Yeah, whoops. Not as cool as I thought it was.
No, the image that's up here is never translate. It comes out the same way.
No. And the moments when you're like, oh, that was awesome. That's the cool moment. And you look back, you're like, oh. But then on the same point too, though, is I had a friend in high school, and it was one of those things where she had a picture taken of her, and I don't know what exactly stance she was doing, but she was doing just one stance. She didn't think of it. She had this angry face on, but it's still one of the coolest little pictures she ever took of martial arts. She just looked like such a such a badass, and she's like, wow, I look awesome. I mean, but at the time she just thought it was, she just did one of the stupid little kata move, and it wasn't anything spectacular, but it looked awesome. Just happened to be one of those things. Yeah. So it works the other way too.
It does work the other way. Well, there was actually when we were at sparring one day and with Sensei Alex, and we were actually talking about a kick, and Alex stood there and he let me throw a high kick just for a demonstration. Well, somebody snapped a picture right at the same point in time, and it looks like I'm nailing him. Like it's a beautiful photo. It looked like I totally caught him off guard, and he was going to post and go, hey, look what I did. I'm like, Alex was standing. He was letting me demonstrate something. Like I didn't catch him off guard. It looked cooler than what actually was going on.
Yeah.
But and then there's the other side too. There's a few times too where something cool did happen. I was really excited to pull something off, and I go back and watch video later, and I was off camera.
Oh yeah. It's
like,
didn't
no.
know it, so.
I know in here. Yeah. It happened.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. No, it did happen. I promise you.
All right. So, well, I think that's going to wrap up the question section. I'm pretty much going to wrap up the show. So, I want to thank everyone so much for your participation today. This was, I think, a great experience. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics. Definitely, if you like this and you want to see more live streams like this, please give us suggestions. What are some heavier topics that you want to get into? What are some even controversial topics that we could talk about? And once again, just I want to support the Kids Kicking Cancer. So thank you for anybody who makes a donation to that. And I really appreciate everyone who's been here. So I think we're pretty much good to go. Do you have any closing statements?
No, I'm thank you so much for everyone that stayed with us through all this. I'm blown away that you guys actually stayed to listen to us chatter on for a while. But thank you so much, and it's been such a blast. Thank you guys.
Yeah, so thank you
You're
guys.
the
So
best.
also, so going back to the poll, so we talked about our poll results. Keep an eye out on our community tab because we will be posting more polls in the near future. And if we're putting a poll out, that's a good indicator of a potential topic we might have coming up for discussion. So if you see a poll, I definitely invite everybody to participate in that and leave a comment below. Tell us why you're voting a certain way because that only helps us kind of craft a discussion around it. Because this is a community, so we feed off each other. So again, thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have the wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next time.